Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Became the Monster Society Created? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A puddle showed a mirror image of the sun in the sky, right as a familiar pair of red sneakers ran across it and made the image ripple. The one who ran across it soon came into focus, showing it was a teenage boy with messy green hair that had a slight black tint to it and large emerald green eyes. Freckles adorned his cheeks as well. His current attire consisted of a black Gakuren-style uniform for junior high with faded gold buttons, and a yellow backpack that looked stuffed to the brim. Rah! Hearing that sound, the boy turned to see a giant man with dreadlocks, a face with a shape that would make one think of a T-Rex, and clothes that pretty much screamed he was a thug had appeared by Tetsuin Station out of nowhere. Oh, that's one huge villain, Izuku said, looking excited. What was happening right now wasn't some special effect, a giant robot, or a projection being used for an action movie. It was real. This was an actual villain that had an actual superpower. No one knows how it all started, just that it began during the year of 2025, in the Chinese city of Qingqing. A small power surge happened one late of night and caused all the lights to turn off for 10 minutes, making a newborn baby in a hospital's nursery start crying out of fear. It was expected that the baby would have stopped once the lights eventually turned back on. However, this wasn't what happened, as only 2 minutes after the lights went out, the baby's father, who was watching them at the time and stayed when the power went out, saw the child glow. He caught the phenomenon on camera, and soon, scientists were rushing to figure out what caused this. This question was left at a stalemate for years, only to be answered when children across the globe who had been born after the luminescent baby started showing weak, yet unnatural abilities around the time they turned 4 years old. While the answer of why this was happening had yet to be answered, and wouldn't be discovered for years to come, one thing had become clear to the entire world. Superpowers were no longer a fantasy. It's been more than a century since these quirks, as the world eventually decided to call them, manifested into the world. With these powers marking the next stage in the road of humanity's evolution, society itself had changed to become like the comics and anime of old, as those who abused those powers became the first villains. In turn, this caused those who fought for justice to become the first heroes and making it the newest job profession. "Out of my way!" the thug screamed. He swung his arm, causing bystanders who had begun watching the scene to gasp as debris to fall towards them. However, before it could land on and hurt anyone. "No you don't!" someone shouted. Rushing under the debris in question, a man held up his arms and then jumped to catch it. He had a square jaw which jut out a notable amount, small eyes, and short white hair that spiked out behind his head. His hero costume consisted of a cyan cardigan, which exposed his muscular chest and pectorals, dark blue breeds with white stripes down each side, and plain black shoes. The real theme behind his outfit, however, came from the large headband with a yellow and black striped caution pattern, along with matching wrist guards and a belt around his waist, which had a square and a triangular decoration sitting in its center. "Alright, way to go Death Arms." A nearby police officer soon saw a rope of water pass by, with some parts of it taking a wheel shape with an X shape inside as another hero arrived. "Please stay back. This area's far too dangerous," he warned. The man in question had a hero costume based on a firefighter, from the yellow jacket down to the red fireman hat, with his hero identity defined by the white mask with a single orange bead embedded in the center. A thin cannon was strapped to his left shoulder and attached to a red water tank on his back, showing where the water from his quirk was coming from. "Whoa, the rescue specialist, Backdraft, is here. He'll keep us safe." Seeing the two heroes gathered before him, Midoriya moved to the front and unzipped his backpack, taking out a notebook labeled Hero Notes V14 on it. As he opened it, preparing to write down anything he saw during this fight, another hero swooped in from overhead. "Kamui Woods." Many girls squealed. The man they cheered for was shown to be a hero whose costume was a dark blue bodysuit mixed with wood, along with a mask that made him look like a humanoid tree without any leaves attached to it. He jumped off a light post and jumped near the ledge of the tracks, making the villain swing one of his arms at him. Kamui was quick to dodge, making the villain growl and look towards him with a strong glare. "Get away!" the villain screamed. Kamui Woods stretched out his arms, which began to stretch out. Using his quirk, he swung himself onto another part of the track and situated himself there for his next move. Wow. He may be new, but he's already making a big name for himself. Izuku cheered, already excited. A man standing by him with plus-shaped horns on his bald head let out a chuckle after hearing that, looking at Izuku with a knowing expression. "That dopey grin is enough to tell me what you are. A fanboy," he stated. "Why, sort of," Izuku admitted, looking away in slight embarrassment. Jumping ahead, Kamui stretched out his arm again to try and restrain one of the villain's arms, only for the thug to roar and toss him around before Kamui released his grip and fell onto the nearby terminal's rooftop. "Assault, robbery, and illegal use of your quirk during rush hour traffic. You are the incarnation of evil," he stated. Part of his arm stretched out, which made many recognize his next move. "Here comes his special move," Izuku exclaimed, pointing towards him. "Lacquered chain prison." The villain soon felt his entire body constrained by wooden binds, seemingly defeating him, until his angry expression visibly strained itself to the point everyone saw him go from enraged to furious. "If that's how you want to play? Then I'll break you, toothpick," he roared. His skin gained a red tint as his size grew even larger, and his eyes became fully white. Kamui's eyes widened as the binds of his special move were ripped apart, and the villain threw a right hook towards him. Cannon, only for something noticeably but not that much larger, to kick him in the face, knocking the thug off the track as his size regressed. Midoriya and the man next to him, along with Death Arms and Backdraft, immediately turned to look at what Kamui Woods himself was now staring at. He stuttered. Landing next to the villain, the giant object was revealed to be another hero. This one being a voluptuous young woman who had purple eyes with white pupils and long, creamy blonde hair that reached to her waist and two shorter strands that framed her face. Her costume, which easily showed off her curves and beauty, was a purple and pale tan-colored skin-tight bodysuit, which is accented with orange stripes. It was paired with purple gloves and boots that, both cut off in a deep V shape by her elbows and thighs respectively. The suit's top also had 3 peculiar orange diamond-shaped dots under her chest, and a purple domino mask with protrusions shaped like ox horns on the sides. Money shot. Money shot. Money shot. Izuku turned as he heard multiple men with cameras repeated that while taking photos of the heroine, making him move away slightly. And that is how a new hero should make their debut. The heroine stated. She soon turned to the male crowd that was still taking pictures of her. "Hey there everyone, you can call me Empty Lady, the world's next hottest hero." The newly revealed Empty Lady greeted, winking at the end. More men began taking pictures. Kamui Woods continued. The police soon apprehended the villain, all while Empty Lady stood beside him and waved to the crowd. This all happened while Midoriya flipped through his notebook, showing a page for Kamui Woods as he opened to a blank section and began sketching Empty Lady onto it, soon followed by information. In no time at all, details on her quirk, her fighting style from what he saw, her strengths and possible weaknesses, had all added to its pages while he mumbled to himself. Her gigantification may or may not have a set limit. While she would be good for fighting larger villains or preventing the collapse of large structures such as buildings, she could easily cause damage if she isn't careful when she grows larger or depending on how she navigates. Perhaps she'll see more work outside of cities. Izuku continued mumbling. Taking notes over there, fanboy? It sounds like you want to be a hero too. The same man noticed. Izuku paused and then looked at him with a smile. Yeah, more than anything, he stated with confidence. At least, that's what it looked like on the outside, but on the inside? He was feeling anything but confident. Following the villain attack, Izuku finally made it to his school, Aldra Junior High, where class soon began. Currently, his teacher was making a small announcement. So, As second-year students, it's not time you start seriously thinking about your futures and what you want to do with your lives yet, but better start early. I could pass out some career aptitude tests he began. He soon snatched them off his desk with an angry look. However, it soon turned into a smile as he turned around and threw them behind him. But why bother? After all, most of you kids are going for the hero track, he announced. In response, everyone began to cheer and then showcase their quirks however they could. The sole exception being Izuku and one other. Yes, all of you have some amazing quirks. Though you know there's no power usage allowed in school, so get a hold of yourselves, their teacher reminded them. At that moment, the student who didn't use their quirk, who had spiky blonde hair and small red eyes, finally spoke. Hey, teach, don't lump me in with the rest of these extras. I'm the real deal. The rest of these clowns will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister, that is, if they even get onto the hero track at all, he stated, with both his confident expression and mocking tone in plain sight. Those words made almost all of his classmates look at him with anger. You think you're better than us, Katsuki? A male student screamed. I don't think I know, Bakugo stated, giving a goofy smile to stab his knife of mockery even further into them. His teacher sighed. That attitude of yours aside, you do have impressive test results, so your chances of attending UA are high, he revealed, if only to make everyone shut up. Everyone stared at their teacher in shock, the exception being Midoriya. No way. He's going for one of the 4 great hero schools of Japan, a male student questioned. And the one that everyone claims is the best no less, a female student added in, equally shaken. They only have a 0.2% acceptance rate, another male student said. Bakugo soon broke into a smirk as he jumped onto his desk and let out an explosion from his hands, looking at everyone like he was a king and they were peasants. Which is exactly why it's the only place worthy of me, he stated, pointing one of his smoking hands at himself. He pointed at the students to his left. I aced the mock test, and my quirk has more uses than anyone else at the crappy excuse of a school, he declared. Then he pointed at the students to his right. However, I won't just get accepted there, Bakugo continued, his confidence growing larger. He then pointed at himself with a toothy grin and a focused gaze. I'll become the one who surpasses All Might himself as the #1 hero. The only thing standing in my way of that goal is my last year here and graduating from there, then taking the hero scene by storm, Bakugo announced, still grinning. Realizing that what he said only made things worse, the teacher decided to take a gamble by saying something else, hoping it wouldn't go as badly as he expected it to. Oh yeah, Midoriya wants to attend you today as well, he revealed. Bakugo froze as Izuku flinched, as his classmates slowly turned to look at him. The teacher was about to say more, trying to stop the fire he set off, but before he could, it had already burned. Aside from Bakugo, who was still standing in place, frozen by the words he just heard, his entire class began to laugh at Izuku. Most of them were only doing so because they thought what their teacher said was funny. However, some of them took it a step further. Oh, that was a good one, teach. A male student laughed. As if a quirkless loser like him could ever enter the hero course at any school, much less UA. Another male student stated in a mocking tone, one whose quirk allowed him to extend his fingers up to half of his overall body height. Hearing those words, Izuku lowered his head slightly. Unfortunately, even after a century since quirks had first appeared, 5% of the population was still without one. Most who qualified under this were older people from earlier generations when the rates for being quirkless weren't as low as now. However, for Izuku's generation, the chances of being born without a quirk were as difficult as getting into UA, and by the research available, in 5 short years, it would become completely impossible for anyone to be born without a quirk. Du. The boy screamed and fell off his chair as Bakugo turned towards him and let off his quirk. Even though he wasn't anywhere near Izuku, he was familiar enough with the short-tempered blonde's quirk to react when aimed in his direction. Aside from the 2 who were mocking him, the rest of their class now showed looks of fear and/or horror. Some were familiar with this reaction, while others had only heard of it until that very moment. Listen up. You're even worse than all these extras here, you quirkless wannabe. Do you really think they'd take someone like you when they could have me? Bakugo said with a wide scowl on his face. As Midoriya tries to explain his reasoning, Bakugo slams his hand down, setting off an explosion that knocks the cinnamon bun off his desk. Come on, Ikkyu. The maniac towers over the cowering boy. You're totally quirkless. And you think you can rub shoulders with me? Midoriya futilely scoots away. Wait, no, Kaken. I wasn't trying to compete with you. Not at all. It's just been my dream. Since I was little, and well, there's no harm in trying. Try. Try what? The entrance exam. Sparks and smoke from Bakugo's palms threatened to end the boy's very existence. What can you even do? Said boy looked down at his feet as he shrank down in place. Get back in your seats, you two. I have to actually teach now. Their teacher stated. The two went back to their seats. As class officially began after that mess, Midoriya tightened his fists as he held a poker face. Despite what Bakugo had said, Midoriya hadn't given up. He had no intention to give up on entering UA High's hero course. Except, was that even possible for him? It was the end of class, and Izuku had planned to just go home like usual when Bakugo and his lackeys stopped him. Stealing his notebook from him, Bakugo held it away from Izuku, a cold look on his face. I don't know what you're doing, Deku, but we're not done. He said, waving the notebook in Izuku's face mockingly. One of his lackeys looked at the notebook before asking, What you got there? Don't tell me you're taking notes on how to be a hero? The other asked, but it was more of a statement. It's so pathetic. They both laughed. He's delusional. They continued to chortle. Yeah, real funny guys. Just give it back. Before Izuku could reach out a hand and retrieve his notebook, Bakugo used his quirk to explode it, throwing it out the window. That's so mean. Izuku cried, mourning the loss of his notebook. Most first-string heroes show potential early on. People look at them and just know they're destined for greatness. When I'm the only student from this garbage junior high to get into UA, people will start talking about me like that. They'll realize I'm legit, the next big thing. That's not ego talking, I just know I'm good. Bakugo explained like it was fact rather than his big head talking. Apparently, his lackey agreed as a sing-songed. Ego escaped his mouth. Then, Bakugo smiled. Izuku didn't like that smile. It was a smile promising pain and punishment if Izuku didn't do as he said. Here's a little word of advice, nerd. Don't even think of applying. Or else. Bakugo placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder and he could feel the explosions burning into his Gakuren. The smoke made him a little dizzy, but he was used to it now with all the bullying over the years. As if he'd just finished imparting an order, Bakugo stalked out of the classroom, lackeys in tow. That's just sad. I thought you had at least some fight in you. Lackey number 1 said as he walked out behind Bakugo. He finally gets it. He'll never be a hero. Better to find out now instead of later, I guess. Lackey number 2 added as they kept walking, throwing a glance back at Izuku. There was no pity there, just cold detachment as they agreed with Bakugo's words. The bully himself stopped just as they reached the door. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there might be another way. He turned around and Izuku could feel hope spark in his heart. Was Bakugo being nice? Did he realize what he said was wrong? The answer was no, and Izuku could feel burning anger in his chest as what Bakugo said next registered with him. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of a building. Izuku was furious at the bully's words and his fingers twitched as he adjusted his shirt, after how they'd been damaged by Bakugo. Bakugo really was irredeemable. Izuku knew that people like Bakugo didn't deserve to be heroes. But what could he really do? He was a quirkless second-year middle schooler with no one to support him. While Bakugo was a talented boy with a powerful quirk, a boy whose chances to get into UA were so great that the school as a whole would side with him. The golden boy, the pride of Aldra and Izuku Midoriya's existence, was nothing but a monster. And Izuku will one way or another destroy him. Through his anger, He felt like he was close to spitting flames like his dad. How dare Bakugo say something like that to him? What if he really jumped her? What then? Bakugo would be a murderer then. And that's just him with the ego of a middle school bully. If he was ever a hero, Izuku froze. If he was allowed to be a hero and said something like that to a fan of his, that fan might actually do it. If Bakugo was ever right about anything, it was that heroes held a lot of influence. Hearing something like that from your hero, Izuku knew that would be more than enough to push anyone off the edge. As those thoughts began to fade, Izuku was shown to have already left school and began heading home, going through a short tunnel that had a sewer lid, which slowly began to rattle. Huh. Izuku blinked, turning around. Once he did, he quickly wished he hadn't. Rising from the gap between the lid and the surface, the sludge villain from earlier slowly reformed, making Izuku's eyes widen and his face pale. The villain's eyes opened up as he saw the young boy before him. A villain? Izuku said as he began to panic, feeling his legs shaking. Yes, you'll make the perfect skin suit for me to hide in. The villain smirked. Izuku screamed before he started running. The villain reacted only seconds later, moving 3 times as fast, and capturing him in seconds before forcing some of his slime down his mouth. Izuku's notebook fell out of his hands and clattered onto the ground as the villain began to cackle. Oh, don't worry, kid. I'm just going to take over your body. It'll be easier for both of us if you stop struggling, since you won't feel anything soon enough. The villain stated. I can't breathe and I can't. Pull him off. Izuku thought, trying to claw off the villain in vain. Since the villain's body was made of a flexible sludge, it was like trying to grab a fluid. There was nothing he could do to escape on his own. Worse was even if he could pull him off, Izuku was already feeling himself getting weaker. Thank you, kid, you're a real hero to me. Now I'll be able to get out of the city before he tracks me down. The sludge villain said, his eyes squinting in selfish joy. As he began to lose his remaining strength, Izuku teared up. This can't be the end. Someone please. Help me. He begged. The sewer lid shot up, making the sludge villain pause. Then slowly turn around before his eyes widened in horror. No. He already found me? He panicked. You don't need to worry anymore. The man who had been chasing him was crouched down from having just left the sewer, covering him in the tunnel's shadow, but then he stomped onto the ground and was slowly revealed by the light peeking through as he stood up straight. An incredibly large man with an equally muscular and well-defined physique that easily resembled the typical Western comic book superheroes of old age. His hair was short and blonde in color, and swept backwards with 2 distinct tufts that stick up above his head, leaning slightly to each side like a giant V on his forehead. While his face had a bright smile and blue eyes that were unseen, due to being shadowed by his strong expression. Right now, he wasn't in his hero attire. Wearing nothing more than a white shirt, green khakis, and plain brown shoes while holding the same bag of groceries from earlier. Though none of it reduced the awe he emitted. Because I am here! All Might exclaimed. The sludge villain panicked and swung his arm like a sideways WHP at the #1 hero, only for All Might to duck under it and then dash towards him. The villain then tried again with his free arm. All Might stopped himself with his left foot at that moment before pivoting himself on his right, then threw back his right arm. Texas! Which he immediately shot forward, creating wind pressure around the incoming punch. Smash! And slammed it right into the villain's arm. The sludge villain's eyes widened at the overwhelming power, which continued until it struck his own body and started to send his sludge flying. I can't. Together. He grunted as panic surged through him. He let out a powerful scream as his body fully broke apart, which freed Midoriya as he slowly began to fall towards the ground. For a brief moment, his blurred vision looked at All Might's heroic form, with his mind struggling to register the sight. Is that? He mumbled. Right as he finished saying these words, Midoriya began to black out. Only for the sensation of something lightly hitting his cheek wake him. Right as he finished saying these words, Izuku began to black out. Only for the sensation of something lightly hitting his cheek wake him. Hey! Wake up! Hey! All Might asked. Finally, Izuku had regained complete consciousness and looked towards All Might's giant form. "Thought we lost you there," he casually greeted. The boy's eyes went completely white from the shock of seeing All Might, his idol, standing right before him. In the flesh. For a moment, he thought he might be dreaming, but the lingering pain in his throat acted as the wake-up pinch he would have otherwise given himself. "All Might," he screamed, backing up a little. "Looks like you're moving around all right," All Might stated, relieved he rescued the boy without lasting injuries or worse. He let out a playful chuckle. "Sorry about back there. I didn't mean to get you caught up in my justicing. Usually, I pay more attention to keeping bystanders safe, but it turns out this city's sewer system is pretty difficult to navigate." He apologized. He then let out a playful laugh, all while Izuku just stared with his pupils having turned into small spirals. "Anyways, you were a big help, thank you." All Might thanked him. He then held up a pair of cola bottles now containing the villain's slime, and presumably the bit that was what remained of his main body, which he had gathered while Izuku was still unconscious. "The evildoer has been captured," he continued. "The most amazing hero in the entire world, All Might, is standing right before me." In the flesh, Izuku thought, feeling his mind racing 1,000 miles per second. As he watched All Might, who was still in his pose, the hero's shiny white teeth flashed. He looked so much cooler in person. His mind screamed loudly enough to wake the dead. Izuku started looking for his notebook. "I have to get an autograph. Please don't leave just yet. Let me just find my notebook and grab a pencil," he begged. All Might held out his notebook to him. "Oh, thank you, Izuku thanked him. He let out a scream as his eyes saw the next blank section he opened to, where All Might's autograph was already present. He even drew a picture his eyes and eyebrows next to it for added flair. "You already signed it," Izuku exclaimed happily, his eyes shining as brightly as his smile. Izuku immediately began bowing multiple times in a row, doing so at speeds so fast that it was a miracle that he didn't hurt himself from it. "Thank you so much. This will be an heirloom, a family treasure passed down for generations to come," he stated, ignoring how stupid he looked. All Might simply gave him a thumbs up in response. "Well, I've got to get this guy to the police so they can take care of him, so stay out of trouble," he stated, holding up a hand as his wave goodbye. Izuku gasped, realizing the chance he was about to lose. The chance to ask his idol. Hold on just a second. I have a question I'd like to ask Dash." He put his hand on All Might's shoulder at that moment, who then jumped right into the air, then screamed as he was forced to grab All Might's leg before he was slingshot across the sky. All Might soon felt the unexpected weight and saw the boy holding onto his leg. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? I love my fans, but this too much. Let go." All Might shouted in shock. "I can't. We're flying right now, so if I let go, I'll fall to the ground and die," Izuku replied, his eyelids and mouth flapping in the wind. All Might paused as he realized that. "Oh right, that's a good point," he said, slightly embarrassed. The green-haired kid managed to hold back his screams, then made his next reply. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I wanted to ask you a question and tried putting my hand on your shoulder to ask you to wait, but then you jumped." He apologized. "Relax, it's fine. This mistake is on me. Now please, close your eyes and mouth until we land," All Might replied, feeling the liquids of both splashing onto him. Midoriya gave a slight nod then closed both. "All right, now to find a dash," All Might thought. He soon felt an uncomfortable and unfortunately familiar sensation in his throat. Cough. He brought his hand to his throat, right before coughed out a bit of blood onto it. Sheet. All Might thought worriedly. Their flight ended as All Might finally landed on a building rooftop with a door leading inside. Once Izuku finally felt the lack of wind hitting him, he let go of All Might's leg and showed his face, which now looked like it had all the life SED out of it. "My whole life just flashed before my eyes," he mumbled while trembling. "And that there is why heroes always keep the civilians who watch them fight villains in a safety area. Even though we may be heroes, we're just as capable of hurting people if we aren't careful with our quirks," All Might warned. Izuku, who was still regaining his bearings, lifted up his left hand and made an O with say he understood. You said that you had a question, right? I'll let you ask it, but make it quick. All Might continued. Hearing that, the timid boy snapped out of it and then hit his chest to regain some of the air his lungs lost from all the screaming he did during the first part of the flight. Alright, what I want to ask you is. He began. The words had trouble coming out, as he remembered some of the things that had been said to him by others. Sometimes, I feel like a failure. That deep down, part of me accepts that there's no hope for me. He thought. He tightened his fists. But even so, I can't give up. Not until I know for sure. That's why I have to ask him. He continued, trying to encourage the words to come out. If you have nothing to say, then I have to go now. All Might said, turning around. Is it possible to become a hero if I don't have a quirk? Izuku asked with a loud shout. At that moment, All Might, who had been ready to leave, froze in place as those words echoed through his ears. Almost like they hit close to home. Little did either of them realize what those words would lead to. And not anything good. Izuku had just asked the NO degree one his question. Silence followed for a few seconds, and then Izuku decided to continue speaking, with tears in his eyes as he did. I'm just a normal kid among a world of people with powers, and who are special because of them, but since I first saw you, I've wanted nothing more than to become a hero. Maybe part of me trying to reject the reality that I can't be one, and maybe it's stupid that I still believe there's a chance, but I need to know. He said, lowering his head. Sniffling a little, he looked up again, his eyes briefly shining from his tears. Could I ever hope to be someone like you? Midoriya asked, almost begging. All Might then looked at Izuku again, but just as he was about to respond, whoosh! His body began to steam up, confusing the teenage fanboy before him as he did. CRP. All Might grunted. Right after saying that, a huge puff of steam covered All Might's form and made Midoriya scream. All Might, are you okay? He panicked. Luckily for him, he got his answer as the steam slowly began to disperse, but once he could see All Might again. He felt his eyes go wide before he rubbed them with his arm in disbelief. Standing before him wasn't the giant he idolized, but a withered remnant of it. All Might was now a very skinny man with sharp, angular features and long limbs, a long neck, and his eyebrows now completely absent. His clothes from before had become baggy on his current frame, almost as if they only accommodated his other form. Why you? Huh? You deflated. No, maybe you're an imposter, or... No, not that. I must still be unconscious from that flight and need to wake myself up. Izuku panicked, the shock too great for him to comprehend. All Might let out a sigh, rubbing his head. Well, I let this happen by saying you could ask me a question, so I guess it's only fair I come clean. All Might decided. Huh? Izuku exclaimed. While I won't explain the full details, you know how some guys at a pool SCK in their gut to look buff? My quirk works somewhat like that. He explained, right as an imagined spot showed exactly that. No way. That's way too drastic of a change to be part of you quirk. Izuku shouted in disbelief. Well, you aren't wrong. It wasn't always part of my quirk. All Might admitted, his voice lowering. Izuku froze at that. Wasn't? He asked. Toshinori just sat down. Brace yourself now. What I'm about to show you isn't pretty. He warned. Izuku watched as he lifted the left side of his shirt, and then he gasped. What he saw was horrible. Around the same time, in one of the city's alleys, a few grunts were heard as the sound of the Sludge villain could be heard. A small piece of him holding his eyes, which had shrunken with him and now resembled olives at their small size, slid outside of a pipe. Man, how lucky am I that All Might didn't find this part of my sludge. Otherwise he would have caught me right there and then. He sighed in slight relief, closing his eyes. He then opened them, only now they had an annoyed look. Only problem now is he might notice soon enough. I need to find a new vessel before I regrow my body, otherwise I'm trapped here. He realized. Man, that was sick. The Sludge villain let out a sound of surprise, then hid behind a dumpster as he saw a trio of kids passing by. The trio in question was none other than Bakugo and his two cronies, who were passing through for whatever reason. You didn't hold back with Midoriya at all. If he looks ready to wet himself that easily, then you're set. The boy with the finger quirk stated. It's his own fault for trying to be anything but the worthless Deku his is. Honestly, whenever he talked about being a hero. Bakugo replied. He growled. Bang! The can he was holding got charred as he used his quirk on it. Seeing his quirk, the Sludge villain's eyes widened before they squinted to show the smirk his currently hidden mouth was making. Dude, don't let Midoriya get to you. Let's go to the arcade and blow off that steam. The other student suggested. Or we could sneak into the bar by the station, pick up a few ladies maybe? The finger quirk boy said with a snicker. Bakugo turned at him with a glare. You idiots! If we get caught, there's no way UA will accept me as a student. Why the hell do you think I've never used my quirk on Deku since that one time back in kindergarten? Boredom? He screamed at them. Both of them flinched at that, shaking a little. Seriously, actually use your heads instead of spouting CRP like that, because I actually remember to use mine. He grumbled loudly. They relaxed after that. Wow, I guess it's knowing details like those that let Katsuki ace the mock tests. The finger quirk boy whispered, looking at his fellow crony. That must be the reason Midoriya's former longing to be a hero set him off so badly. The other boy whispered back, gulping after he did. Right at that moment, the Sludge villain began to cackle, catching the trio off guard. Hey, who's there? Bakugo warned, holding up his hand as it let off a few warning sparks. They got their answer when the Sludge villain's regenerated slime body rose up, opening its mouth over Bakugo, who had no time to react as it chomped down on him. Boom! Bang! Bam! His two cronies screamed as the entire alley area caught on fire, and caught the attention of many, while others began to scream and panic from the explosions. Izuku was still staring in horror at the sight that All Might, or Toshinori in his current form, had revealed to him. Then again, who could blame how he reacted? All Might, the seemingly invincible hero, had a nasty scar. Pretty gross, isn't it? I got this wound in a fight 5 years ago, and it didn't stop at just the skin. My respiratory system was destroyed, and I lost my whole stomach, so it's a miracle that I'm even alive right now. Worse is that all the surgeries have worn me out, and there's no way to fix it. The form you saw before is me using my quirk to recall my old strength, but only for so long. Toshinori explained. He then closed his eyes. As of now, I can only do hero work for 3 hours. He revealed. You can only be active for that long? No way. Izuku breathed. Right after saying that, he realized something. Wait, just who was it that gave you such an injury? Going by the color, it looks like it came from Toxic Chainsaw, but then you would have a cut across your torso. That looks more like someone stabbed right through you. He asked as he analyzed the wound. The injury had a circular shape, with Toshinori's skin looking shriveled and stained with red spots, with a clear area that looked like someone had stabbed right through him. Impressive, you clearly know your stuff. Though you wouldn't be able to figure out who did this to me. After I was injured, both the head of the police force and the highest level of the HPSC did whatever they could to hide this fight from the world. After all, I'm supposed to be the unbreakable symbol of peace, so if anyone learned about this, it would cause a panic, despite the one who injured me is no longer of this world. Toshinori replied. Izuku froze at those words. A villain that was so powerful that All Might was forced to take his life, instead of taking him in? Just what kind of monster were they? He asked himself. The thought made him shiver in fear and in slight awe at the idea of someone as strong as All Might. For some reason he was curious. He lowered his head, looking at his feet slightly. Not knowing what to say to the man. Some condolences for his condition. Some encouragement. Maybe an apology? Even though you're telling me all of this. It just doesn't seem real. You're the hero who saves everyone and defeats all obstacles with a smile on his face. Izuku said so quietly he was almost muttering. That smile of mine? It's all just an illusion. Toshinori admitted. Izuku looked at him in shock after hearing that. I smile because people need to think that I'm never afraid, But there's a lot of fear behind that smile. Especially as reality is sinking in. The reality that I made a mistake in holding up society on my own. He explained. Mistake? What do you dash? Izuku questioned. Kid, with how you judged my wound, I think you're smart enough to understand the comparison I'm about to make. Imagine. Hero society is a building, and I'm the sole pillar that's holding it up. Even if that one pillar is enough. What would happen once that one pillar starts to crack, and then eventually breaks? Toshinori asked. It took a moment, but after Toshinori said that, the horror had already appeared on Midoriya's face. Regardless if it was because he died or retired from heroics, because of the gap between him and Endeavor. It wouldn't be long before villains notice and crime rates surge like they did in the era of chaos, just like how All Might is what brought it to an end. He realized as his eyes shook. Toshinori then coughed, breaking Izuku out of his stupor. Anyways, putting that aside, I haven't actually gotten to answering your question yet. He said, realizing how off track he had let things get. But in all honesty, he wasn't looking forward for this conversation. Oh, all right. Izuku replied, straightening himself up while Toshinori sighed. Sorry kid, said Toshinori with a frown as he looked away. Izuku's lively eyes that were once filled with hope went pale at the words. The words that almost mirrored his doctor 8 years ago. What? Asked Izuku in shock. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but I can't let a kid lose his life in an attempt to pursue my path. He said, as his hair formed a shadow over his blue eyes, masking his guilt. Izuku felt his reality in itself shatter to pieces as he looked at the man he idolized for all his life, or the true self of the man who was everything but what he thought. A liar and hypocrite. You liar, mumbled Izuku quietly. Huh? All Might asked confused. You liar. Izuku cried to the top of his lungs, as he knelt down to the floor, crying. It was then that an explosion caught both their attention and they looked at the source. Toshinori quickly ran off to the source. Fires raged across the alleyway that Bakugo and his cronies were last in, with the reformed Sludge villain laughing as he held Bakugo's body in his clutches, somehow being able to activate the boy's quirk while flailing his slimy body around. Both of Bakugo's cronies were surrounded by flames, unable to move without the risk of being engulfed by their blaze. Thus, I hit the quirk jackpot with this kid. With his power, I have the means to take down All Might. The villain laughed manically. He released more explosions as some heroes finally arrived. It was Death Arms alongside a baseball-themed hero and another wearing a white suit, yellow cape, and a helmet shaped like a bird's beak. The three all stared as they saw Bakugo trapped inside of the villain's disgusting form. Damn it, he's taken someone hostage. Death Arms stated, growling slightly at the sight. He slammed his fists together. How dare you prey on a child? He screamed, before rushing towards the slimy monster. He then jumped up into the air and then reeled his fist back before throwing a right hook. Squish. Unfortunately, the moment Death Arms' fist struck the villain's body, it simply absorbed the punch's impact, then swallowed his fist inside of it, making Death Arms gasp. What the hell is this? Some kind of goo? He questioned. The Sludge villain then punched Death Arms into the nearest wall, causing him to slam against a metal door before he rose his slimy hand into the air. Say goodnight, hero. He cackled. He channeled Bakugo's quirk factor, causing his raised hand to spark before he swung it down. Death Arms looked up as it came down, but luckily, the caped hero sped by and grabbed him just in time before the building was set aflame. What kind of quirk lets him be made of goo and cause explosions? The baseball-themed hero questioned. It isn't him making them, look at the kid. Backdraft replied. Everyone looked at Bakugo tried to wrestle himself free, releasing explosions from his hands while doing so. You picked the wrong guy to mess with. Once I get out of here, I'm gonna send you back to whatever sewer you crawled out of. He loudly screamed, still trying to push free of the sludge. The Sludge villain let out a laugh, as the explosions did nothing more than tickle him. Keep trying kid, it's cute. I could use the performance before I choke you. He laughed. The slime on his body shifted and grabbed Bakugo again, this time pulling some of his mouth area over Bakugo's to cut off his air supply as he released more explosions from his slimy hands. Kamui Woods, who had tried to grab Bakugo during the moment he got free, was forced to pull his arm back to avoid it being set on fire. Unable to grab him, he instead used the opening to rescue the two cronies and some other civilians. Backdraft, douse the flames near him. I can't save the hostage, Kamui requested, moving those he rescued to safety. I can't, not yet at least. There's still a lot civilians in the danger zone. Backdraft responded, spraying some flames. We can't get close either. His quirk is making our attacks useless, and we'll just get blasted if we try. Even worse is he's started suffocating the hostage. Death Arms said, trying to find an opening they take advantage of. A few stomps were heard, causing a woman in the crowd of civilians to gasp and point to its source. Look, it's that new hero, Lady. She'll stop this guy. Hearing this, one of the Sludge villain's eyes moved behind him, allowing him to swing his arm towards a tall building structure as MT Lady approached. A quick explosion caused the building, which had people inside of it, to tilt. MT Lady immediately caught it, but when she tried to shift her feet to move it to a safe spot, it bumped into another building. Looking to the side, she paled as she realized the situation she was now in. No good, this is a one-lane road. I can't get the traction I need, she shouted. Kamui Woods jumped across the buildings and to the damaged building she held. Don't worry, I'll get everyone out, he stated. Demon it, he keeps putting us into a shutout. Are there any other heroes on their way? The baseball-themed hero questioned. It was then that Toshinori finally arrived on the scene, taking a moment to catch his breath. Which is when he saw the horror. What? No, I captured him, didn't I? He thought. Looking at the two bottles he contained, which he still had in his pockets, he saw neither had the villain's eyes. This made his own widen in shock. Demon it. He must have known I'd go looking for him and moved part of his sludge somewhere I couldn't find it. I'm pathetic. Toshinori grunted. Around that point, Izuku had also arrived and saw how bad it looked. Just what kind of villain is doing this? Midoriya thought, moving through the crowd to try and get a better look. He then gasped as he saw it was the Sludge villain. No way, but I thought All Might caught him when dash. Izuku then paused, recalling his sludge was held in not one, but two bottles. It didn't take long for him to theorize how he was here now. Part of his sludge must have gotten away, allowing him to hide escape. What else could go wrong? Izuku thought, feeling himself panic. This is bad, none of the heroes are able to do anything. Izuku regretted saying that once he heard that civilians reply, unaware that wasn't even the worst of it. Can you blame them though? That villain's got access to an exploding quirk from the kid he's got hostage. He froze at that. Exploding quirk? No way, don't tell me. He realized, looking at the Sludge villain again. Izuku's eyes widened as he saw Bakugo struggling within the sludge, running out of air. No, he has Bakugo. Izuku panicked. Hey, hold on a second. Isn't that the villain that All Might was chasing earlier? Someone asked. What? All Might? He lost. Another panicked. No way, but he did chase the villain after he went into the sewer. It's possible that he doesn't even know he escaped back to the surface yet. A female civilian replied. The other heroes need him, he better hurry. The second civilian stated, hoping that he'd arrive soon. Toshinori lowered his head in shame. Except, I can't. Why am I so worthless? He thought, gripping near the area of his shirt hiding his wound. Izuku was also listening and knew that their hopes wouldn't be answered. Because of him. He would have had enough time to show up and stop him if I hadn't wasted it. Worse, none of the other heroes have the right quirks. There's no guarantee others are on the way or have the right quirks if they are, or that they'll even get here in time before Kaken suffocates. This is all my fault, he thought. As the Sludge villain kept laughing, Bakugo's eyes started to roll up. Izuku realized what that meant, and felt himself shaking at the sight. As Midoriya stared at the sight of Bakugo's form, something within him began to well up, and before he even realized what he was doing, his notebook fell to the ground, and he began running towards the Sludge villain. A sight that shocked All Might, the civilians, and every other hero on the scene. "No, stop. You're gonna get yourself killed." Death Arm screamed. But Izuku didn't stop. No, it was more like he couldn't stop. It was such a shock to see him run out that even the Sludge villain froze. "What am I doing? Why am I running? Why can't I stop?" he questioned, still running ahead. Only then did the Sludge villain remember what was going on. "Wait, why am I freezing up? I've got to kill this brat," he shouted. "What do I do now?" Izuku thought. At that moment, he recalled the page about Kamui Woods in his notebook. Page 25, right? He thought as he grabbed his backpack and began to pivot. The Sludge villain threw out his arm, only for it to hit Izuku's backpack, which he threw towards him, causing the All Might-themed pencil case inside to break open and make the pencils inside to fly out, with two flying right into the Sludge villain's eyes. "My eyes!" he roared in pain, closing them in pain. This caused his hold on Bakugo to relax just enough for him to breathe, right as Izuku reached Bakugo. "Bakugo!" he screamed. "The hostage is free. Now's our chance." Kamui Woods shouted. All of the heroes rushed towards the villain. "Hurry, we have to save those boys. This thing will kill them." Death Arms shouted. Bakugo finally noticed Izuku, who was attempting to dig him out of the sludge. "What the hell? Why are you here?" he shouted. "I don't know. My legs. They just started moving." Izuku answered frantically. He finally reached his arm and began pulling, though Bakugo's body didn't budge. "Get out of here. When will you finally realize that a quirkless loser like you can't be hero?" Bakugo roared, glaring at him. "Maybe that's true, but..." Izuku admitted. He closed his eyes as he remembered everything that he had said, or other had said to him, about his dream. Izuku's eyes opened up, with tears flowing out of them as he briefly let out a whimper. All of the old memories from his painful past coming back to him in that moment. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die," he shouted without any doubts. The sludge swallowed Bakugo again as the Sludge villain's eyes healed up and reopened to glare at Izuku. "DMN brat. I'm done playing with you," he screamed. Explosions went off as the rushing heroes were pushed back, and Izuku was knocked to the ground as the Sludge villain readied his hand to slam down and splat his green-haired form across the pavement. Toshinori then growled. "I have to do something. No matter the cost," Toshinori thought, forcing out his muscle form through sheer will. He then rushed by the crowd and shielded Izuku just in time, surprising everyone, including Izuku himself. "We'll talk later, kid," he said. "All Might? How are you?" he asked. "Time to finish the job," All Might exclaimed, cutting Izuku off. He ripped the sludge off his arm, with both Midoriya and Bakugo staring at the sight in awe. "Damn you, All Might!" the Sludge villain screamed. He swung his arm out, using Bakugo's sparks once again. "Detroit!" He grabbed Bakugo, and then punched right through the explosion that was released, surprising the Sludge villain as his fist neared his face. Smash! All Might ripped Bakugo free as the punch hit the Sludge villain, and then grabbed the area of his body where his eyes were. The rest of him was destroyed as his punch's force was able to create a tornado. MT Lady dropped to the ground, helping Kamui Woods cover some of the civilians from the wind, while the remaining heroes shielded the civilians on the opposite side until the cyclone's winds came to an end. Once they had, All Might breathed a little, with everyone watching him in awe, unaware the sky had darkened until it began to rain. "Rain," one civilian said. "Look at the clouds, they're moving." Another person pointed out. "That wind. It changed the weather." Death Arms said in awe. With those words, everyone began to cheer at All Might's victory, leaving all the other heroes to stare at the hero who was leagues above them. Did that really just happen? He changed the weather with one punch like it was nothing. The first person shouted. All Might soon caught his breath, struggling to hold his muscle form while the public was watching him, and then glanced towards Izuku's frozen form and internally frowning. Shortly after, the Sludge villain's remaining piece went into All Might's bottles, which was then contained by the police. Midoriya was on his way home, expecting his mother would freak out. "I never did get an answer from All Might," he said with slight sadness. "Do you?" He flinched and then turned around, seeing Bakugo rushing towards him, catching his breath once he finally stopped. He said nothing at first, but then let out a slight growl. "Listen up. Don't you dare think you saved me today, because you didn't. You did nothing. Don't change your mind about applying to UA's hero course after this. That's my only warning to you," he screamed. Bakugo then turned around and began walking off, leaving Midoriya to stare at him in surprise. "Wait, all of that was just to yell at me?" Midoriya thought, feeling a little weirded out from it, though he could tell why he yelled at him. Because he had to share the attention with Izuku even though he was scolded harshly instead of the praise that was given to the blonde for his strong quirk. Izuku's fists clenched tightly, so tightly his knuckles turned white. He felt so much anger at the selfish attention-seeking BSRD right now that it was getting too much to bear. There was literally nothing that could make this day worse for the green-haired boy. It was a disaster all over. First, the whole class made fun of him for wanting to attend today, and then he was almost killed by the Sludge villain. Then his dreams shattered by All Might, and Katchan was almost killed by the same villain, and he was scolded by the DMN heroes, and Bakugo just had TOB and a-hole again now. There was nothing that could make today worse. "Young man, we need to talk." Looks like the universe just took Izuku's thoughts as a challenge and won. The green-haired kid turned to see All Might in his skinny form looking at him with frown. His eyes seemed worried but angry. "What were you thinking running in like that into danger, young man?" All Might asked in worry. "If I haven't been there, you would have been dead along with that kid." Izuku looked down at his feet as he pressed his thumbs together and answered nervously. "I'm sorry, sir, it's just, whenever I see someone in distress my legs move on their own before I get the chance to think," Izuku explained with stuttering. All Might let out a sigh as he looked at Izuku with nostalgia and sadness. His face looking like he was torn between sadness and pity. "Look, young man, I told you, it's almost impossible to be a hero without a quirk," All Might said sadly as he glanced to the side, unable to look the boy in the eyes. "I'm sorry." Izuku fell to his knees as he clutched at his chest tightly as All Might said the same words his mother gave him as a child. "You better give up. Despite your sheer courage and selflessness, it's still too dangerous." All Might looked at Izuku with shame. "Without a quirk, you can't be a hero." All Might finished his statement as he turned with guilt and walked away. What he didn't know was that he just stared what most would consider the start of the end. The end of this age and everything related to it. "I'm sorry." Izuku fell to his knees as he clutched at his chest tightly as All Might said the same words his mother gave him as a child. "You better give up. Despite your sheer courage and selflessness, it's still too dangerous." All Might looked at Izuku with immeasurable shame. "Without a quirk, you can't be a hero." All Might finished his statement as he turned with guilt and walked away. "It's alright to dream, but you have to be realistic. There are other jobs you could go for." The barely hero left with a look of absolute guilt, like he did something that will eat at his consciousness forever. Which will, but in the way he thought. As the blonde hero left, Izuku was still on his knees crying, dwelling in his sadness, misery and despair, tears flowing from his eyes like rivers as he sobbed desperately. "Sorry kid, you better give up." The doctor's words echoed in his head. "You better give up, Deku." Bakugo laughed in cruelty. "I'm sorry, Izuku." His mother cried out as she sobbed. "It's impossible. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero," All Might said. Izuku stood up as he wiped his eyes from all the tears. "He won't give up so easily. No. You shouldn't be disheartened this easily, Izuku Midoriya," Izuku declared with determination. Like All Might said, even if you can't be a hero, you still have many other jobs to aim for. So don't give up. Izuku dusted off his clothes as he started walking to his home. Even if his dream is over, that doesn't mean that life is as well. He can still do many other things. It might not be a direct route, but I can still help others. It's too early to give up, Izuku exclaimed as he started walking home. Little did he know he was going to see how distasteful this world truly is very soon. Home was never more welcoming, But at this point, anything was more welcoming than what he went through. It was not easy to hold back your tears in front of your mother or your idol, the man that you looked up to for all of your life turned down your dream. It was emotionally draining to say the least. Izuku? Is everything all right, sweetie? Inko asked in a worried tone. Yeah, everything's all right. Izuku said as he took off his shoes, then rushed to his room hoping his mom wouldn't notice his injuries. He reached his room, his only safe haven, but it looked different. Everything in that room that he loved her so much, that he spent his entire life decorating, disgusted him. But he knew it wasn't the room that changed. He was the one that changed. He laid in bed, rethinking all of his life's decisions, and cried. It wasn't his fault he was born quirkless. He didn't want that. All he wanted was to have a great quirk and help people. Is that too much to ask? Is that a crime that the world decided to put him in torment for the rest of his life? Then there was a knock on the door, which filled Izuku with dread. Izuku? Honey, I saw the news. Are you okay? Inko asked in worry from behind the door, and Izuku let out a groan of absolute despair. Why did she have to find out about this? Honey. His mom called again. I'm fine, Mom. Please, just leave me alone for a bit, please? Izuku asked, his tone filled with despair and sadness. There was a short pause after the green-haired boy's question. Then the sound of footsteps getting farther away was heard, and Izuku let out a sigh. He was tired, he felt tired. But he also felt empty in the inside after he got his dreams shattered like this by the NO degree 1 hero like that. He didn't know what else to do. Sure thing, he decided he could still help other people somehow, but he didn't know how to do that. After some time of thinking of what to do, he drafted into a complete opposite subject from his future, his past. His goddamn past with that bastard Bakugo. If you want to be a hero so bad, there might be another way. Pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of a building. Bakugo called out with a laugh. All of Izuku's sorrow, sadness, despair and pain became something new. Hatred to the bastard who hurt him, hatred to the teachers who did nothing, hatred to the people who would look at him in disgust the second they find out he was quirkless. Along with rage, pure unadulterated rage that was bubbling under his skin, threatening to explode outwards. Seriously, was that such a huge crime these days that he was treated like this for 10 years? He really wanted to get back at Bakugo, but he was realistic enough to know that this wouldn't happen in his wildest dreams. Bakugo was his polar opposite, everything Izuku was not: strong, confident, popular, with AF quirk. So how in the name of God could he get back at him? Izuku shook his head as he got up from his bed with a sad look. No need to waste his time on such things. It was pointless. But his feelings of rage and hatred were still boiling, waiting for anything to be unleashed on, but he didn't have that at the moment. Izuku, dinner is ready. Inko called out from the kitchen, and Izuku sighed as he got up and started walking to the dining room. Coming, Izuku said as he went to eat. I was thinking of visiting the Bakugos later this week. Would you like to come with me? Inko asked. Izuku froze mid-step as he was walking, then he yelled as he knelt down and slammed his left fist on the ground. Izuku, honey, are you okay? What's wrong? His mother asked, rushing to his side. She got to her knees beside him and embraced her son in a worried hug. When Izuku didn't respond, her worry only grew. Izuku, I saw what you did on the news. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? Baby, please answer me. She asked as she removed herself from the still non-responding Izuku, keeping a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Izuku started, remembering the last 24 hours. He slowly raised his right fist. Izuku? Inko asked nervously. Somewhere deep within Izuku's mind, a drop of liquid red rage dripped down into his soul. The ripples spread far and wide. Hate this life. Izuku roared, slamming his other fist into the floor, as his mother leapt back in shock. Her son had never shown such anger in his life. Izuku. What? She couldn't finish her sentence before Izuku yelled again. Hate Bakugo. Now Inko was even more shocked. She had never heard her son swear before. He's been torturing me for 10 years. Ever since he learned I was quirkless. He what? Inko asked, looking at Izuku with her green eyes filled with confusion and worry. Izuku, why didn't you tell me? I thought he was my friend, Izuku answers. I thought that maybe if I treated him kindly, gave him time, that he'd stop it and we could go back to being on good terms. I guess I realized that wasn't going to happen when school ended earlier today, and he told that if I wanted a quirk I should jump off a roof and hope I get one in the next life. He let out a dark chuckle at that revelation while his mother just gasped in shock. I'll have talked to the Bakugus. But first, I have to calm down my son. Inko thought to herself. Izuku, it's okay, I'm here for you. You know that. I'll talk to the school teachers and… Oh, they know, Izuku interrupted. They know what he and the other students have been doing, and they don't do shit to stop it. If anything, they praise Bakugo. Say someone needs to show the quirkless kid his place in the world, and all that. See. But you want to know the final touch on the worst day of my life? I met All Might. Izuku growled. What? Inko's anger was replaced with confusion at this point. How is meeting All Might a bad thing? She asked her son. Izuku let out a low chuckle. Well, you'd think it was a good thing, wouldn't you? He saved me from the same villain that attacked Bakugo earlier when I was walking through an underpass on my way home. Then he signed my hero analysis book number 13, which, by the way, got burned before I left school. Guess who did it? Then I asked him the question I've been needing to ask him for years. Inko knew what that question was. And he said no. Said a quirkless person couldn't be a hero and that I had to be realistic. Oh baby! Tears were threatening to fall from Inko's eyes now. To hear that her son's dream had been shattered by the man he looked up to all his life. And after the incident in the shopping district, he caught me on my way back here. He scolded me and said that I could have gotten myself killed. And I… Tears filled Izuku's eyes again as he slammed his fist into the floor again and he started to cry. But why was I so stupid? He fell into his mother's shoulder, using her long green hair to soak up his tears as she embraced him and rubbed his back soothingly. He didn't notice that his mother was weeping as well. Drip, drip, drip went their tears onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip went the fury into Izuku's soul. After a few minutes the two stopped crying and Inko turned to look her son in the face. Listen to me, Izuku. You are not stupid, no matter what anyone says. If you can't be a hero, then be something else. Not being a pro doesn't mean you're not a hero. You've never said that before, Izuku interrupted. Inko stopped and looked at her son who was staring at her with a blank face. I asked you if I could be a hero without a quirk. You just started crying and saying you were sorry, like I was diseased or something. Izuku stood up and stepped away from his mother who was looking shocked at what her son was saying. You never believed in me, and now after 10 years you tell me this? You're just like them. Just like All Might. Just leave me alone. Izuku turned and walked away towards his room. Inko got to her feet and tried to stop him. Izuku, please. No. Izuku spun round and glared at Inko with a look she had never seen her make in his life. The anger in Izuku wasn't dripping anymore, it was pouring like water from a sink. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look at you. Leave me alone. He turned and stormed up to his room. Inko heard the door slam as he locked himself in. Oh, Izuku! Inko said sadly to herself, as tears started to reappear in her eyes. Izuku sat on the chair in his room, legs folded under his chin, trying to get his thoughts in order. He didn't know what was going on with him. He told his mother that he didn't want to talk to her and to leave him alone. What's wrong with me? He asked himself in his mind. Being in his room didn't seem to help. If anything, it just seemed to make the whirlwind of thoughts in his head worse. The All Might posters on the walls and hero collectibles that once showed his lifelong dream, his obsession, now seemed to mock him. They became a reminder of what he could never be, because of something he could never have. The quirk. Izuku sighed as grabbed a box and put all his collection in it so he could sell it later. No doubt it will get him a lot of money if he sold it to the right person. It was then that his mother entered the room with a sad face. Izuku, I'm so sorry, Inko said as she sat on the floor next to her son and held his right cheek. Don't cry, being a hero isn't everything. You can do amazing things if you put your mind to it, you just need to try. Inko said with a smile. Izuku sighed and nodded his head. He was too tired, but he can try for something else. He won't give up. No way. Izuku trailed off in shock as he looked at his applications. All are rejected. Izuku said in disbelief. Why? I don't know. The school career guider said with a shake of his head. All those police schools, hero innovation engineering schools, and even technician schools rejected your application. I am as helpless as you are. The woman said, then looked at Izuku apologetically. I'm sorry, was all she could add. Izuku exited the woman's office after giving her a polite but dazed bow, then left for class. When Izuku arrived at school the next day, his classmates had already heard both about Kaken's invitation to jump off a roof and Izuku's idiotic run-in with the Sludge villain, and they had apparently decided that the two must be related. Ever since then, his classmates has been as inviting as the blonde, which set him off even more. The loser, there are easier ways to kill yourself. He was just being an attention hog. Can you imagine wanting to die on live TV? Izuku shook his head. He was through the same thing always, so nothing new to him now. Or so he thought. Izuku had been wrong. Suicide baiting was different than what he'd been through before. A few days ago, he definitely suspected that most people would be happy if he died, but now he knew it. Was living even worth it anymore? Maybe it would be easier, but Izuku still couldn't be responsible for making his mom feel guilty. He frowned as he started to walk home. Being quirkless SCD. Izuku was so distracted by the conversation with the Kara guide lady that he didn't see one of Bakugo's lackeys stick out his foot to trip him until he was already falling. He hit the ground hard and the contents of his backpack scattered all over the hall. The other students simply pretended not to see as they trampled his notes, and Izuku felt his eyes start to water. Look guys, Deku's clumsy and a crybaby. Izuku tried to blink back the tears as he scrambled over the floor, trying to pick up his papers before they were ripped beyond repair. There was a pair of teachers chatting a little further down the hall, but they didn't so much as glance at Izuku even when he cried out as one of the meaner students stepped on his fingers. Oh sorry Deku, I didn't see you there. The kid's smile gave away his insincerity, not that Izuku had been expecting an actual apology anyway. He finished shoving everything back into his bag and stood to get to class, trying to avoid everyone's eyes. As he wiped away the tears. He's such a useless weakling, why does he even exist? Izuku kept his head down and did his best to ignore the whispers as he walked into the classroom and made his way to his seat. But the day kept getting worse and worse for Izuku. Look guys, it's Deku. One of the kids at another table called out as Izuku walking into the cafeteria with his shoulders hunched. The students sitting at the nearest table looked ahead and grinned as they walked to him. What's up, Deku? The boy with extendable fingers asked. Still alive. A small group of their classmates had surrounded Izuku. The kids were grinning and laughing like the fingers had just made the funniest joke on earth, but Izuku himself was just staring silently at the ground. He had nothing to do with them. Screw them all. Why so quiet? Another extra, this one with boulders for hair, asked. Finally realized that no one cares what you have to say? Izuku internally growled at that. Seriously, breaking his fingers when he uses his quirk was ridiculously easy. It's much easier than when they are at normal size. Well, it was about time he did. No one cares for what a quirkless loser who wishes to be a hero has to say. The boy with the popping out eyes said, seriously, his quirk was the worst. Izuku could grab a knife and cut the nerves off and he wouldn't have eyes. Or maybe you'd like to gather attention before you try to get yourself killed again? The girl who could barely lift her FANG phone with telekinesis said. God, she was as bad as eyeballs. He could just grab a knife and stab her. What good was her quirk? Aside from Bakugo, they weren't any better than him. Wait, that they weren't better than him. So why? Why the hell did he have to suffer like this? Was being quirkless this bad? Was it such a serious crime? And why was he rejected like this by schools? His grades were enough. Was it because he was quirkless too? How could hero society get to this point? featuring the footage of a quirkless boy running in to save another boy from a villain while the heroes stood by and did nothing. Izuku and his mother turned to the TV to see the news playing footage of his encounter with the Sludge villain. Izuku internally growled in frustration at that. And an interview from the HNN. Here in the HNN we have a special guest. The newsman said as the camera turned to him, showing a man in a gray suit with short black hair with golden strands. He has dark blue eyes and wears glasses. Please welcome the Minister of Hero Law Enforcement Department, Mr. Mizuki Raida. There was some applause at the announcement. Thank you for having me, Mizuki said with a slight nod. Mr. Mizuki, as you see, the topic is about the footage of the incident downtown spreading around the internet. Then newsman said with a smile. We want to hear comments about the matter where a student was taken hostage by the villain from the ministry itself. There was this reports about this boy who happens to be a quirkless who rushed in trying to save his classmate while the heroes didn't take any action. Mizuki frowned as he gave the camera a stern frown. First of all, it may seem like an act of honorable bravery, but it was in fact a blatant obstacle for the heroes' operation. You're saying that even though the heroes didn't make a move, the boy's actions were still an obstacle? The newsman asked in surprise. Yes, I am. The boy jumped into the scene while the villain was using the other boy's quirk to cause destruction. It may seem like the heroes weren't doing anything, but they were limiting the destruction to an acceptable level until further reinforcements arrived according to our protocols. Mizuki explained. However, this boy's act does not only increase the chances of him getting hurt but also the chances of aggravating the villain and cause more destruction and possibly hurt the innocents. Mizuki shot a glare at the camera. People may seem that the heroes took no action at the scene, but they were in fact trying to limit the damage to the structures and thoroughly monitor the situation. And as you can see, the situation was smoothly solved by our symbol of peace without any need for the boy's pointless deed. We also had reports that the boy has been applying to many hero schools and many other security agencies. He apparently wants to be a part of the hero working field. Do you have any comments on this? The newsman asked with a smile. To be a hero, one must gain proper training first. Using a quirk without a license is no better than being a villain. I personally think that the boy is not suitable for a hero or any security jobs, Mizuki said sternly. Izuku fell to his knees as he looked at the screen in shock. He knew people were cruel, but this was just too much. From behind, Inko hugged her son with tears in her eyes as she pulled him closer to her in an attempt to comfort him. What the hell is the meaning, Mizuki? Toshinori snapped as he slammed his fist on the minister's desk, his blue eyes glowing dangerously as he was considering smashing the man's face in. How could you let them broadcast such a thing? Did you even consider the kid's future? Please calm down, we had no other choice. We did that out of necessity, Mizuki said calmly as he was looking through the window with his hands behind his back. Necessity? Toshinori repeated with more anger than skepticism. Yes, it's all for your sake, symbol of peace, Mizuki explained. How's that for MY's sake? What about the kid? Toshinori snapped. We have been trying to hide your injury and diminishing time of operation for a while now from the public. It might be a little too harsh, but your image is worth the cost of boy's sacrifice. Hero society must remain strong, Mizuki explained coolly. To achieve that, the symbol of peace must be free from the slightest of faults, Mizuki said as he looked at Toshinori, who looked down. You're saying that because of me that boy was ripped off from his future? Toshinori asked, stunned. Mizuki sighed. Please understand that this for the sake of hero society and yours. Symbol of peace. Toshinori's fist shook in anger. I can't even save mere boy? What kind of pathetic hero am I? Izuku glared daggers at the turned-off TV as his mom was washing the dishes. The heroes always get away with this, but do they ever consider who the F else gets hurt? Izuku paused at that. Who was getting hurt? It wasn't the heroes. It was probably the villains. But what about everyone else? Izuku sat there silently. Everyone else, huh? He muttered. Izuku leaned back and pulled out his phone. He entered the search engine and absent-mindedly typed in civilian casualties hero. He slowly scrolled through the list. At first it was just news reports. People tragically dying to villain attacks before heroes could save them. Heroes dying in the line of fire. That sort of thing. But the more he scrolled, the more incriminating things he found. Izuku got up. He needed a bigger screen. Izuku ran at his room and slammed the door shut, tuning out his mother's worried calls. He felt a twinge of satisfaction as he looked at the money he got from selling his limited edition All Might merch through the internet. Night I paid over 3 million for that CRP. What a fool. Izuku ignored the feeling and went for his computer. When it logged on, he entered the same thing he did into his phone and scrolled through a few pages till he found the interesting parts. It was an old report. A small story in an independent newspaper about a number of accusations that number 2 hero Endeavor was doing more harm than good. People who had been horrifically burned by the pro hero. He wondered how this story hadn't circulated more. He looked into the paper. He really wished he hadn't. The story on Endeavor had come from an issue before it was announced it was closing down operations. As it turns out, the newspaper was sued because of the story but settled out of court. Their crime was defamation. The Hero Commission had issued the lawsuit and the resulting payout had crushed the newspaper and run them out of business. The story was buried. It wasn't the only story that ended this way. A journalist was fired from a fairly high position in his newspaper for issuing a story about a number of SXL assault allegations involving pro-hero Midnight. Another was a collection of heroes whose reckless behavior had killed innocents. This paper was crushed as well. All Might's name came up a few times in that story. Other stories included how some petty thieves had their arms crushed beyond repair for stealing some money for their family. Another involved the straight-up murder of a suspected villain in his own home but because he was thought to be working for at the time wanted organization, Villain Factory, all charges were dropped. The sun long set before Izuku took a break. He looked at an image of All Might's that popped in his phone. How many lies have you been involved in? He muttered. The Hero Commission was corrupt beyond repair. Rotten to the core. The people had been led to believe that the heroes were paragons of justice, but that couldn't be right. Not from all he had read. All the proof was in those articles. Images of people who were suffering not because of villains abusing their powers, but of heroes doing the very things they were supposed to be protecting others against. Children idolized them. Wanted to be them. He wanted to be. The realization hit Izuku hard. He felt hot. Far too hot. He also felt sick to his stomach. He grabbed his backpack and filled it with his precious notebook MS, then wrote a note apologizing to his mom, then pulled the money and ran to the door. Izuku, honey? His mom asked him in worry. Where are you going? I'm going for a walk. Izuku lied. He went to her and gave her a hug, confusing her. I love you so much, he said, then bolted outside the apartment. Why? Izuku shouted at the top of his lungs as he stood on top of a building. The same building where All Might crushed his dreams like they were nothing. Am I at fault for being quirkless? Izuku roared hatefully. Izuku looked down at the city lights. It looked appealing, a nice one last view if you ask him. Is it wrong to have a dream? He whispered softly as he removed his shoes. He took off his backpack and took a look at his precious notebooks. The notebooks that he spent years over years cultivating and filling to the brim with knowledge to help him and other heroes or take them down in the most brutal ways possible. He put the backpack next to his red sneakers and closed it before looking down. Damn it. I curse you all. Izuku whimpered as he readied himself to jump. He had enough, but ironically he was jumping because his dreams are impossible, but because he had them in the first place. Because he wanted to be in the same boat as those sickos called heroes, who do nothing but hurt others. You must be terribly sad. A voice spoke behind Izuku. It's tragic, right? I can see how this cursed world pushed you to the brink. Izuku turned to see a shadowy figure a small distance behind him. Is being born quirkless a serious crime? That it tips someone off their right to dream? The man asked while approaching. That type of distorted society, don't you think it is better gone? Of course I do. Izuku replied. This kind of society where heroes talk about some bullshit pipe dreams. After all, they are just shameless effing hypocrites. I hate them. I hate them so much. Izuku cried. Poor child, hurt by selfish and heartless people. How much suffering have you been through? The man asked. No one ever reached their hand to you, am I right? The man got next to Izuku, right in front of him as he put a hand on the boy's shoulder. If you are thinking of throwing your life away, why don't you came with me? He asked. He was a tall man whose face was entirely made up of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though the outlines of his eye sockets were visible. You can be whatever you want because I am here. The man extended his hand to Izuku, who stared for few seconds but then took it. It was here that the greatest villain was finally born into the world. Why? Izuku shouted at the top of his lungs as he stood on top of a building. The same building where All Might crushed his dreams like they were nothing. Am I at fault for being quirkless? Izuku roared hatefully. Izuku looked down at the city lights. It looked appealing, a nice one last view if you ask him. Is it wrong to have a dream? He whispered softly as he removed his shoes. He took off his backpack and took a look at his precious notebooks. The notebooks that he spent years over years cultivating and filling to the brim with knowledge to help him and other heroes or take them down in the most brutal ways possible. He put the backpack next to his red sneakers and closed it before looking down. Damn it. I curse you all. Izuku whimpered as he readied himself to jump. He had enough, but ironically he was jumping because his dreams are impossible, but because he had them in the first place, because he wanted to be in the same boat as those sickos called heroes, who do nothing but hurt others. The fact that he was one in million that wanted to be heroes, or fake ones anyways, made him nauseous. Because there will be more and more of these bullies as time goes on, he could only hope that they burn each other out in their own greed and selfishness. You must be terribly sad. A voice spoke behind Izuku. It's tragic, right? I can see how this cursed world pushed you to the brink. Izuku turned to see a shadowy figure a small distance behind him. Is being born quirkless a serious crime? That it rips someone off their right to dream? The man asked while approaching. That type of distorted society, don't you think it is better gone? Of course I do. Izuku replied. This kind of society where heroes talk about some bullshit pipe dreams. After all, they are just shameless effing hypocrites. I hate them. I hate them so much. Izuku cried in agony, tears pouring out of his eyes. Poor child, hurt by selfish and heartless people. How much suffering have you been through? The man asked. No one ever reached their hand to you, am I right? The man got next to Izuku, right in front of him as he put a hand on the boy's shoulder. If you are thinking of throwing your life away, why don't you came with me? He asked. He was a tall man whose face was entirely made up of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though the outlines of his eye sockets were visible. You can be whatever you want because I am here. The man extended his hand to Izuku, who stared for few seconds but then took it. As Izuku took the hand, they pulled Izuku off the ledge and helped him down. Thank you. Izuku murmured with a weak, broken voice. Almost like a whisper. He felt so tired, so exhausted, so not done with everything. Don't mention it, my boy. Why don't you put your shoes back on and sit down? We have a lot to talk about. The man suggested gently, and Izuku nodded at the suggestion. He was too tired to argue anyways, and he couldn't care less for the man's scary looks. The green-haired boy put his red sneakers back on as he looked at the man. His appearance was strange, but Izuku could tell it wasn't his natural look, but from an accident of the sorts. As Izuku put on his backpack, one of his notebooks fell to the ground, and as he went to grab it, the man did so first. Hero analysis for the future? And no degree 13 no less. The man mused, and Izuku shrank on himself in embarrassment. Yes, it's a hobby of mine since I was a child. I analyze heroes, their quirks, fighting styles, quirks, strengths and weaknesses. Nothing worth noting. Izuku said, looking down while poking his fingers together. He felt embarrassed that the man found about his creepy habit. People always made fun of his notebooks and called them useless, creepy or stalky. This is truly a work of art. Izuku perked up at that. Why would you think this is nothing? I'm very sure that this could help in the rise of multiple heroes further or their downfall. The man said the last part with a suggestive tone, a very sadistic one. Izuku for some reason liked the last part a lot honestly. Sir, not to be rude but, who are you? Izuku asked timidly, hoping to not anger the scary-looking man who only nodded his head at the question. Excuse me my boy, age must be getting to me, my name is All for One. The now All for One introduced himself with a smile that would scare anyone, but Izuku was too emotionally exhausted to feel a DMN thing. Well sir, All for One dash. Call me Sensei my boy, because from now on, I will help you in your quest. I will help you channel that rage and hatred on those who had it coming, on those who hurt you, and on this messed up world in general. You will get your fulfillment, because I am here. All for One spoke, reveling in using his arch-nemesis's catchphrase against him. It was petty and childish, but it felt good. Izuku nodded. Well sensei, how am I of all people going to get revenge? I am nothing but a quirkless nobody. Weak and talentless. Nothing is special about me. Izuku said, looking down. He was used to everyone telling him that, to the point it became a part of who he is and who he saw himself as. Izuku was looking down, so he didn't notice the villain's frown at the statement. Nonsense my boy, in the opposite in fact. All for One spoke. Let me tell you about myself, but first, why don't we go somewhere more private? All for One snapped his fingers and then black mud started covering Izuku. The supervillain noted that Izuku looked more intrigued by the quirk than frightened. Which was very amusing to say the least, as the boy looked at the quirk like it was a toy he wanted to have so badly. The villain felt nostalgia at that. As the black liquid swallowed them both, they disappeared from the rooftop. It was the last time Izuku Midoriya was seen by anyone in Mizudafu. After a bit, Izuku materialized in an old warehouse that was dark and filled to the brim with tanks full of colored liquid, medical equipment, and other scientific tools. Welcome to my lair. This is where I spend most of my time. Take a seat and let's begin our talk. I can tell that you feel very confused right now. All for One instructed, and Izuku obeyed as he took a seat. He was in fact very confused right now and needed some answers. So, I have few questions to you. Sensei. Izuku said, and All for One nodded his head. Ask away my boy. The scarred-faced man said with a hand gesture motioning for the boy to start speaking. Well, for starters, who are you? Not your name, but who you are actually, and why do you want to help me? And how do you know who I am? Izuku asked nervously as he looked down, afraid of offending the man. Well, to answer your questions by succession, I am the king of the underworld, the man who controlled Japan from the shadows. I am as old as Quirks, and my name is the same name as my quirk All for One, which allows me to take quirks from others and use it for myself like they are my own, or give them to others. The old villain explained. Izuku's eyes widened at that. Take quirks? That's incredible. This changes everything we know about quirks. How many quirks can you wield? Can you use more than one at the time? How do you take them and transfer them? Is it touch-based? If you are this old, does that mean you have a longevity quirk? How many quirks do you have? That's too many questions for a first meeting. The villain mused, and Izuku slapped a hand to his mouth with an embarrassed look. He started mumbling again, didn't he? God, this is embarrassing. Sorry, I get excited when it comes to quirks. Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, and the scarred-faced man chuckled in amusement. Worry not, young Izuku. I tend to do something similar when I see an interesting quirk. Mostly how people waste the potential of their quirks by using them in mundane and pathetic ways. All for One admitted. I know what you mean. There are many heroes who don't realize the full potential of their quirks. Like Midnight, if she used support items like bullets full of her compressed gas, she could shoot people from a long distance to SBMson. Izuku said with a frown. All for One grinned amusement. Good, but let's get back to your questions. The reason why I want to help you is simple. In fact, you have potential, limitless, untapped potential even without a quirk. I have seen your courage, your intelligence, and good heart. And if those fools will not give you the chance, then so will I. You have seen the wrongs of society and was wronged by it, how distasteful this world truly is, and how not just you, but a lot of people have been treated. I want to see how you will change this world if given the chance." The villain king explained to the young boy. It wasn't a lie. When he first saw the boy, all he saw was Yoichi. The boy screamed, "Little brother," in ways All for One wasn't comfortable with, so seeing how he was treated, how he was sent to the brick. The king of the underworld decided that if Yoichi couldn't see his point of view, this boy will. After all, he knows what it's like to see a broken child and give him a home, give him compassion and nurture him. Tenko was the best example for that after all. He was hurt beyond description by his family, and after his quirk decay manifested, he killed his entire family and left in the streets to fend for himself until All for One found him. He thought he found the successor he wanted, but the boy was too impulsive and impatient, unstable sometimes. He would make an amazing villain, but he wasn't leader quality. This boy in front of him, on the other hand? He would make a great leader. He obviously has the talent and smarts, but lacks too much in the physical area along with self-esteem and even self-worth. Maybe burn the boy's old school for self-satisfaction later, but nothing training, praise and experience wouldn't fix. Izuku Midoriya is broken, but not beyond repair. Do you really mean that? You really think I have potential, that I could do something with my life? Izuku asked in shock with his eyes full of tears. It was too good for the little boy to be true. Yes, I do. Those notebooks alone speaks volumes about your intelligence. Something like this coming from a self-taught 14-year-old boy is truly astounding, and as for you believes of being weak, I lived in the dawn of quirks, young Izuku. I know how capable and dangerous the quirkless are. So yes, I know you for a fact that you can do great things if given the chance. All for One confirmed with a nod. Izuku clutched his chest tightly with his hands, as started tears pouring out of his eyes like rivers. For once someone, beside his mother who needed 10 years to do so, told without a doubt that he was talented, that he was of worth, and that he wasn't useless. It felt that good. It felt great, like a weight has been lifted up off his shoulders. And the idea that probably the worst villain in the history of Japan was the one to tell him that. It showed Izuku how messed up society truly was. It made him more sure than ever of his choice to destroy it. "Thank you," Izuku said as he wiped his tears with a tissue paper that his sensei so kindly offered him. "Don't worry about it, for now I'll just give you a brief of it's gonna go from now. We are going to start your training now. From tomorrow you will start basic physical training, and learn how to lead a villain organization from me personally." All for One explained to the boy he decided to take as an apprentice. Izuku gave his sensei a shocked look like he couldn't believe it. "Me? A leader? I am not fit for such a role. Who would ever follow me?" Izuku asked in shock, waving his arms frantically in panic. All for One chuckled. "Don't worry, my boy, you are not alone. Your brother will be your guide in your path to true villainy." The old villain explained calmly with evident amusement. "My brother?" Izuku repeated slowly. "Yes, young Izuku. Your brother. I am taking you as my ward from this very day. You are not the first one though. Years ago I found this boy wide-eyed in the streets, alone and scared. No one helped him just like you. The civilians and passers-by just told him that a hero will help him. And the heroes? No one did. And why would they? No glory would come from that. He wanted to be a hero just like you and got the reality of who they are shoved in his face. I took him as my own and raised him, in hopes of having a fine successor in him, but even though he proved to be an amazing villain material and one that would feared by others, he is no leader." All for One patted Izuku's head. "But you are. You two would make an amazing team. So do you want to meet him?" Izuku looked down at his lap. He knew that he wasn't the only one suffering in this world. He wasn't so self-absorbed that he thought that, but hearing it now made him realize how messed up things truly are. Izuku looked at his sensei and nodded. "Yes, I would be glad to do so." Izuku nodded with determination. Tamura Shigaraki scoffed as he watched the repeat of the news about the quirkless boy who charged bravely to save a classmate just to be banished by this Mizuki whatever in live television. The Tsunava Beach, he ruined a quirkless kid's future beyond repair without a care in the FING world. It reminded the fanatic gamer of why in the darkest pits of hell he hated this society. The kid will probably take a swan dive off the roof of some building by tomorrow and nobody will give a flying F about it. Fanji NPCs, acting like all is great and perfect, smiling like fools while ignoring those in need, or worse, actively pushing them to the brink. Society doesn't like people who are different. They bully them, shun they, try to get them to conform. And some do, they suppress what makes them different until they fit it in. But it's almost always temporary. Those bottled-up emotions and feelings will eventually burst and cause them to act rashly. That's how mist villains are created. Sure, some are just selfish motherfuckers who do bad shit for the sake of it, but most aren't. Most are pushed into villainy, mostly mutants and those with villainous quirks. They are the most likely to be villains. That interview is quite hypocritical, don't you think? Tamura Shigaraki? Kurogiri asked, and Tamura scoffed. Obviously, that NPC is blowing sheet-ton of hot air for the image of that blonde oaf of hero. Tamura said, irritated as he scratched his neck. You're saying that even though the heroes didn't make a move, the boys' actions were still an obstacle? The newsman asked in surprise. So news guys can ask the right questions sometimes. Tamura said sarcastically. I don't think the question did matter much. Kurogiri said. Yes, I am. The boy jumped into the scene while the villain was using the other boy's quirk to cause destruction. It may seem like the heroes weren't doing anything, but they were limiting the destruction to an acceptable level until further reinforcements arrived according to our protocols. Mizuki explained. However, this boy's act does not only increase the chances of him getting hurt but also the chances of aggravating the villain and cause more destruction and possibly hurt the innocents. Bullshit. The only thing you are correct about is that the Sludge F caused a cluster F dashed. Tamura scoffed. Kurogiri only hummed at that. Mizuki shot a glare at the camera. People may seem that the heroes took no action at the scene, but they were in fact trying to limit the damage to the structures and thoroughly monitor the situation. And as you can see, the situation was smoothly solved by our symbol of peace without any need for the boy's pointless deed. The only thing pointless is your face. Tamura grumbled. The boy kinda reminded him of himself. He used to go around and help people as a little kid, but that only got him beaten up at home by his shitty old man. This boy was the exact same thing. We also had reports that the boy has been applying to many hero schools and many other security agencies. He apparently wants to be a part of the hero working field. Do you have any comments on this? The newsman asked with a smile. To be a hero, one must gain proper training first. Using a quirk without a license is no better than being a villain. I personally think that the boy is not suitable for a hero or any security jobs. Mizuki said sternly. Sunava Beach. Tamura said with a glare. His sensei was right. Hero society was a structure waiting to be torn down to shreds. And he will be the one initiating that. Now ready, Tamura Shigaraki, or will bring your new partner very soon and you should be in presentable shape. Kurogiri reminded. Tamura grinned at that. Yes, his sensei promised to get him a player too to help in his quest. Sensei said he can't do a solo game because he lacked the necessary skills, mostly strategy, leadership and charisma. Well, Tamura in all honesty would admit that he wasn't the best in team playing or leading a campaign. Maybe a player too would be great for his goals, and as Sensei said, they would be brothers. Tamura never had that. Yes, he had a sibling, but in all honesty he didn't like her that much, and his old family SE, Kurogiri and Sensei were all he had, and now he was getting someone else. Bring it on. Kurogiri was texted and he opened a warp gate to transfer whoever this is. Two figures stepped out. The first was Sensei and the second was. Tamura blinked as he rubbed at his eyes. It was the brat from the FING news. He took a glance at the TV and sure enough the picture displayed in the screen was the same as the one in front of him, but the boy now looked more blank, empty, broken, while the picture in the screen showed him to be a bit happier, though Tamura noted that even in the screen the smile was more plastic than real. Which was fair considering the bullshit he has dealt with as a quirkless for the good part of his life. Hello Tamura, how are you doing today? Sensei asked casually. Tamura was on one of the stools of the bar while Kurogiri was standing on the counter cleaning a glass like a real bartender would. Fine Sensei, and you, how's you health? Tamura asked politely. He knew his teacher wasn't in good shape since his fight with that motherfucker All Might. More than fine, but never mind that. Meet your new partner. Sensei motioned to the boy and Tamura glanced at the boy to see him looking like a nervous wreck. Tamura could work with that, as long as he sees what's special about him. Hello, my name is. The boy looked nervous as he spoke. Deku. Deku Shigaraki. He finished smiling at the last part. Yet Tamura also felt proud of his last name, his connection to his MSTR. Nice to meet you both. The boy bowed formally. Kurogiri bowed back. Greetings young'uns too. I am Kurogiri and I will be here to help you and Tamura in everything you need. Don't hesitate to ask me. Kurogiri said and Deku nodded. So you are player 2? Nice to meet you, I'm Tamura Shigaraki. Tamura introduced himself. So even though you don't have a quirk, what are your skills player 2? All for one handed Tamura a notebook. It was singed and had watermarks on them but Tamura grabbed it and started reading and his eyes almost bugged out. What the F dash? Forget quirks. T's notebooks are gold. And with Sensei's quirks this boy would destroy society like it's nothing. Tamura grinned widely as he flipped through the pages. He grinned too widely it threatened to crack his and tear apart his lips. You wanted to be a hero so badly, huh? He did see it. Those notebooks were made with passion. I don't think so. Not anymore. Not that they'd let me anyway. Yes. Quickless. He said as if it'd slip his mind, he knew how they were treated. Their loss. I read a few pages. Impressive analyses. Think you can do me? Analyze me. What can you tell me about my quirk? Well, Izuku stuttered since this is completely unexpected. He never had someone asked him to do it. He was confused for a bit but then his nerd mode took over. I think you have a 5-digit contact destruction quirk. You can't control it. It destroys everything you touch with your 5 fingers. All the boy did was laugh. I got it wrong? There's no need to laugh. No. You got it exactly right. My quirk is decay. Everything I touch with all my fingers decays into dust. What you just did was impressive. How did you do it? I just noticed that you held the notebook carefully. Almost like you were scared of touching it with all 5 fingers. Same with that game you're holding. I assume that's how you activated your quirk and since you were trying to avoid it, it most likely was something destructive. Player 2 said bashfully. Tamura grinned as walked to him and slung an arm over his shoulder. Wanna come with me and play some Smash? He said as he held up the game he was holding. Izuku didn't know what to think. First Shigaraki nearly forgot that he was quirkless. He said his analyses were impressive. And now he invites him to play video games? It felt surreal to him, but Sensei said that Tamura would understand him and accept him. And he did. I'm nothing much. It's just been a hobby since I was young. Pleasure to meet you Tamura-kun. With that the two went to play together, and all for one smirked to himself, this went better than he expected. Katsuki seethed as he watched the news while eating. Deku. That stupid, quirkless, useless, quirkless, pitiful, quirkless weakling, was the only one to come rushing in to save him. Katsuki Bakugo. He didn't need saving from that nobody. Yet he was the only one to come rushing in like that, and pull him out of that sludge freak. A smirk came to his face. At least he got torn a new one by all the heroes around and now in TV. Too bad All Might didn't let him have it as well. Having his favorite hero tell him what he did was stupid would have put the final nail in the coffin of that loser's dream once and for all. The sound of the phone ringing broke Bakugo out of his thoughts. Choosing to ignore it, he went back to eating his dinner. Hey, Kachi, get the phone will you? Mitsuki, his mother, asked as she helped herself to a mouthful of food. You get it you lazy bat. Katsuki growled back. This earned him a smack behind the head from his now furious mother. Is that any way to talk to your mother, you little turd? She roared in his face. Is that any way to treat your own kid, you old hag? The boy pushed back just as viciously. Come on, guys, not at the table, Masaru asked politely, whilst also making ready to duck under the table if he needed to. Mother and son snarled at each other in a staring contest, while the phone continued to ring. Mitsuki finally gave a tired sigh and got up. I'll get it. Ha! Katsuki rubbed in his victory as he scarfed down the rest of his meal. Mitsuki picked up the phone and brought it to her ear. Hello, Bakugo residents. The Bakugo mother instantly recognized the trembling voice on the other line. "Hey, Inko. Long time no talk." Bakugo couldn't help but eavesdrop as he ate, but then instantly regretted it. It was that useless thing. If that little chicken decided to tell her about how he'd been picking on him at school, he was going to be in for a world of hurt. "How's it going?" Mitsuki brightly asked, until her face began to slowly fall into an expression of worry. "Inko, is something wrong?" "No, Izuku isn't here. Why?" "Oh no, Inko. It's gonna be okay. Okay? I'm coming over." Mitsuki slammed the phone onto its holder and ran past the dinner table. Bakugo stopped eating when the conversation started getting tense. He and his father got out of their seats and ran to see the mother fetching her coat out of the cupboard. "Honey, what's wrong?" Masaru asked, showing a rare moment of strong authority. "Izuku's gone missing," was the woman's answer as she pulled her coat on. "I'm heading over to Inko's right now to see what's up. You want to come with Katsuki?" The boy shot his head up at the question. There was a time when he and Deku were once friends, but when he got his quirk and Deku didn't, their friendship became nullified. "Heck no. I don't want anything to do with that quirkless nobody." A hand grabbing hold of his collar and pulling him close to the seething face of his mother made him instantly regret his answer. Mitsuki knew the reason why her son stopped hanging out with Izuku was that the poor boy didn't have a quirk, and it was garbage like this that she couldn't stand coming out of her son's mouth. As much as Mitsuki wanted to let her spoiled brat of a son have it, she had more important things to do. She took a deep breath to calm herself before speaking once more. "I haven't got time for this. We'll talk later." She let the boy go and dashed for the door, slamming it shut. Bakugo stood in the hallway stunned by the look in his mother's eyes. She had never looked at him like that before. Katsuki turned toward his father, who just looked at him with nothing but disappointment. He turned back toward the dinner table and continued with his meal. Katsuki was astounded by how he was being treated. There was only one thing he could do when times like this arose in his life. Blame them. It was all his fault for disappearing in the first place. Why was he getting punished? That stupid little crybaby always did get everyone's attention more than him. Well, wherever the little nobody had run off to, he'd better do himself a favor and stay there. Because if Deku ever showed his face again, he was going to get it. Izuku Midoriya never returned home that night. Or the next one. Or the one after that. Inko and Mitsuki contacted the authorities, who put out a missing person alert for the boy. Days turned to weeks, but there was no sign of Izuku anywhere to be found. Local heroes were notified of the boy's disappearance, promising to keep a lookout for him. But even with the heroes' help, Izuku Midoriya was never found, as if he had vanished into thin air. As for Katsuki, he couldn't care less. The bomb boy wouldn't dare to admit it out loud, but he was glad to be rid of the useless broccoli-headed dork. He couldn't fathom why his parents were making such a big deal out of the green-haired nobody in the first place. He also couldn't understand why the loser's mom was so torn up about his disappearance either. The guy was quirkless. What good could he do, other than steal his heir? Whatever, it didn't matter. Now that Deku was long gone, it just helped Bakugo to focus on getting into Yuta, not that it was going to be any sort of challenge for him. With his quirk, the world was his. An all-you-can-eat buffet laid out just for him, and he was ready to dig in. Who on earth could possibly stop him? Bakugo was sitting at his desk in school, looking up at the ceiling with his usual scowl. He turned back to his side to look at the vacant desk where Deku used to sit. Ever since the quirkiness nobody vanished, the tone around Aldra High School had completely changed. He growled. Even when he wasn't around, the Deku still had to have some notion of existing. Whether he was here in the flesh, or when other people were talking about him. So, what do you think happened to him? Bakugo caught on to a conversation happening between a few students on the other end of the classroom, whispering and taking turns to look back at the empty seat. "I don't know. Do you think maybe he was kidnapped? Or maybe someone got him with their quirk? Well, couldn't he have defended himself? With what? Don't you remember? He didn't have a quirk." "Oh shoot. That's right. Man, I actually feel sorry for the guy." Bakugo could have spit when he heard that. All of a sudden, two figures approached the ash-blonde boy. It was the two cronies who liked to follow him around and picked on Deku whenever he did. One of them was an overweight kid who could grow wings out of his back, while the other had dirty blonde hair and could cause his fingers to grow to unnatural lengths. Finger Boy decided to pull out Izuku's empty seat and plop himself in it, right next to Bakugo. "Hey, Bakugo! Isn't this great? That quirkiness nobody's finally gone. Just like you always wanted." He cackled. Bakugo barely looked at the SCK up next to him. Not getting the toughest kids in the school's attention, the snarky kid decided to try again. "I bet he took your advice and decided to drop himself off the roof. About time, huh? Who needs a quirkiness freak like him? What is wrong with you?" Someone shot up from the group of kids on the far side of the room. Finger Boy and Fat Wings turned to look at who had raised her voice. It was a schoolgirl who could turn her hair into a neon blue WHP. "How could you say something like that?" Taken by surprise by the girl's words, Finger Boy stood up and began defending himself. But it's true, isn't it? If you don't have a quirk, then what good are you?" "That's not fair." A boy who had rocks for hair spoke up next. "Lots of people without quirks can still do something. Like, join the police force or something. Why are you sticking up for the Deku now?" Everyone stopped to look at Bakugo, who had finally said something. He looked down from the ceiling and toward the group of kids. "It's not like you were friends with him, right?" A girl who could summon a small twister with her right hand hesitantly spoke up next. No, but don't you miss him too, Bakugo? I mean, he did save you from that Sludge villain a few weeks ago." Bakugo shot a deadly glare at the girl the moment she brought up his greatest shame. All of the students froze under the explosive boy's gaze. Even his two cronies were scared stiff as he rose out of his chair and stalked his way toward the small group at the front. He then slammed both his palms on the desks at either side of him, smoke simmering out from the burning wood underneath his hands. "Don't ever bring that up again. I didn't need that Deku's help. I don't need anyone's help, and I never will. I'm going to be the best hero this world has ever seen, and I'm going to pave over that stupid incident like the garbage it is. And if that Deku ever shows his face around here again, I'm gonna dash." All of a sudden, the classroom door slid open, and the teacher walked in. "All right, class, settle down. Time to start the day. Bakugo, please take your seat." The explosive boy shot the group of kids one last look before stomping off back to his spot, seating himself down and propping his legs up on the chair in front of him. He honestly didn't care what happened to the Deku, whether he took his advice and decided to jump off a building somewhere or not. Midnight had heard a lot of jokes about her being out at midnight, and she had never thought any of them were funny. The rated R heroine was making her nightly patrol around the city, riding her personalized motorcycle. But so far, there had been no word of any bad boys misbehaving. She pouted at that thought. She got herself all dolled up for some fun and had no one to play with. Wasn't there anyone out there that wanted to try to top the Dom? Her earpiece crackled to life before speaking. "Dispatch to all hands. We've got a break-in at the South Street Bank. Suspects are considered armed and dangerous. Any authority or heroes, please respond." Midnight placed her finger on the piece. "This is Midnight. I'm 2 blocks away from the location. Be there in the crack of a W." "Roger that, Midnight. Good hunting." The agent on the other end stammered. Midnight just loved messing with people. Revving her engines, she raced toward the disruption, licking her lips in anticipation. When she arrived, she could easily see 4 men already inside, hacking into one of the ATMs with a hardwired phone, completely unaware of her arrival. Midnight almost felt sorry for these boys, almost. She kicked her C-Whistle onto its stand, then made her way inside the bank. She peeled off the sleeve of her outfit, letting her quirk, somnambulist, drift off her skin and begin clouding the closed-off room. Whoa. What do I spy? A few naughty boys stealing from someone else's piggy bank. The thugs turned around to see Midnight standing there, in a confident and domineering pose. However, her confidence halted a little when she spotted that all 4 of the crooks were wearing gas masks. Why would a bunch of small-time, petty criminals be wearing gas masks of all things, to a bank heist? Oh shoot, the kid was right. She really came. one of the thugs cried out. He had a clothes that resembled a Mexican thug with a dragon tattoo on his left arm. Midnight was caught off guard. There was no way a pack of mediocre thugs could have predicted her showing up and being ready for her powers like this. How could they have known? Did they plan this? They sure didn't seem the type to formulate such a trap. It looked well thought. Too well thought. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted when an enormous fist struck her in the back of her head, making her see stars. The R-rated heroine fell to the ground, her vision shaken and blurred from the thug's sucker punch. Holy shit! A thug with a brown hoodie shouted. We did it! We actually beat a hero. As the gang took a moment to celebrate their victory, Midnight struggled to regain her senses. She looked at them and had one idea: that how was she losing to those morons? So, now what do we do now with her? A thug with a green bandana that covered his mouth asked, scratching his chin. The large thug who clocked Midnight from behind smirked as he cracked his gigantic knuckles. He wore a leather jacket that was opened up over nothing, showing his abs. I say we put her down for good. Make sure she can't come after us later. Midnight managed to hear that in her daze, and she did not like it. Was this really the end for her? Dying on the hands of some idiots? She would have settled to die on the hands of some good-looking guy, but none of them were. Not one bit. No. The singular voice silenced all others present. A blurred figure appeared and started coming her way. The thugs parted out of the stranger's way, allowing him to walk up to the downed heroine. The sleep gas heroine managed to get her sights straightened out, just in time to get a look at the figure before her. What surprised her the most about the likely leader of the gang was just how young he appeared to be. The boy didn't seem like much to look at, much like every other no-name delinquent on the street. He wore a dark green hoodie with a yellow backpack on his shoulders, a pair of torn blue jeans, red sneakers, and the lower half of his face was obstructed by the gas mask he wore. But what she did manage to see of his face were his eyes. A pair of sagging, unstable, enraged, hateful green eyes, which she could have sworn were staring right through her. What the hell do you mean, no? The brute barked, obviously not happy to be told otherwise of what he wanted. The boy went about retrieving the HNDCFFS from Midnight's utility belt. If we kill a hero, we'll have more heat on us than being plain old bank robbers. He then locked the woman's wrists to a metal railing nearby. Do you really want every hero in the area on our tail for taking out of their own? Or worse, All Might himself? The crooks break out into a cold sweat at the mention of the symbol of peace. No way in hell itself did they want a piece of him. None of them had a death wish. Thank you so much. Seeing that his words had sunken into their heads, the boy stood back on his feet, leaving Midnight restrained on the floor. Grab what you can and let's go. The cops will be here soon enough. All right. The crew of crooks got back to work, raiding each of the ATMs for all the bags they had in stock. All Midnight could do was watch, defeat hanging heavy over her. How could this have happened to her? How did these guys know that she'd be the one to show up? How could they have been so prepared to deal with her and her quirk this whole time? It was at that moment that it clicked for her. It's you, isn't it? The boy turned back slightly when he heard her. Glad to have gotten the boy's attention. There have been reports of a villain who's been able to analyze heroes and decipher the weaknesses of their powers. And that's you, isn't it? The boy turned back to face her and began to slowly walk toward her. Is that your quirk? Midnight inquired. To recognize people's quirks and the weaknesses they have? The boy knelt down to look the downed heroine in the eyes, his glowing green own piercing into hers. No, it isn't. The dom heroine felt a flutter of nervousness pass through her body but forgot all about it in an instant when the boy began to reach up to his mask. As a matter of fact, he removed the mask and revealed a small button nose, a pair of cheeks pecked with freckles, and the most terrifying smile that Midnight had ever seen on a human face. I don't have a quirk. The R-rated heroine was stunned silent at the sight of such an evil-filled grin. One that would the devil himself a run for his money. I hope you're not too hurt, Ms. Midnight. The young mastermind's smile shrunk from its demented size, yet still held its unhinged nature. I was actually quite a big fan of yours. The honk of a horn caught both their attention, the boy turning back with his smile still in place. Guess it's time to go. Wish I could stick around. But I have better things to do. The boy then stood up and made his way toward the door. Wait! The woman cried out, managing to stop him for a moment. She just couldn't let him go without taking one more question. Who are you? The boy turned back slightly to look her in the eye once more. He placed his mask back upon his face before giving her an answer. Deku. A gentle knocking at the door drew the owner of the small apartment to scurry over and open it up for Mitsuki Bakugo. Hey, Inko, I got your message. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. That was a lie. Mitsuki knew that for a fact. The sight of Inko Midoriya was enough to tell how she was doing. Ragged and tired. Bags under eyes. Hair a tousled mess. She'd even put on a few more pounds. It was too clear to her that Inko was not fine, but Mitsuki kept her friendly smile up for the sake of her old friend. I got your message. Is everything okay? The glycerin woman inquired, cautiously keeping her oblivious act up. Oh, that. I was just hoping you could come by and have dinner with me, that's all. Another lie. Mitsuki made her way inside the stout woman's home and spotted what Inko had made for dinner, laid out on the dining table. Katsudon. Izuku's favorite. Mitsuki quickly learned that whenever Inko made that specific dish, it meant that the day had been rough on her. Though every passing day where Izuku never came home was rough for the distraught mother, the katsudon would be a clear sign that the day had been particularly horrible. Oh, Katuston. Well, I suppose I could stick around for a while. The bomb boy's mother's mask nearly cracked at the sight of deep-fried pork and rice. The two mothers took a seat each at either end of the small table and began to dig in. The tension was so thick in the air, you could cut it with a chainsaw. The two women took small bites of their food as if eating too much would set off some invisible bomb they were somehow aware of. Inko would stare into her dish with a distant look in her eyes, looking up from time to time to see her friend eating as slowly as she was. For the sake of appearances, Mitsuki would shoot the green-haired woman a quick smile before taking another bite, with Inko giving a weaker one back before returning to her dinner. The silent eating went on for another 5 minutes. Inko closed her eyes and set her chopsticks down to one side, a resolute frown on her face. I talked with Hisashi today. Mitsuki stopped mid-bite. Oh no. The levitation woman's face scrunched up in emotional pain as tears began to fall from her eyes. He said it was my fault. It's my fault I lost him. It's my fault he's gone. The glycerin woman slammed her chopsticks down on the table, letting her anger boil over. That stuck-up, yellow-bellied, son of a dash. But he's right. Inko interrupted. It is my fault. No. Mitsuki shot out of her seat and rushed to her friend's side. Inko, no. It is not. Fault. Yes, it is. The distraught mother wailed back. He was 4 years old when he was told he wasn't quirkless, that he wasn't like everyone else. Inko ranted as she gripped her hair in exasperation. When we got home, he rushed right to the computer and kept on watching his favorite clip of All Might for the rest of the day. He looked me in the eye, tears running down his face, and begged me if there was any chance he could be a hero without a quirk. And what did I say? What did I say? Inko. Mitsuki tried to break her friend out of her self-inflicting rant. I'm sorry. The plump woman blubbered. That's all I could say. I drove him away. I gave up on him. I didn't believe in him. You didn't give up on him. The glycerin woman objected. You were trying to protect him. He could have gotten hurt if he tried to be a hero. But I should have just let him try. Inko argued back. My boy, the world's first quirkless hero. Wouldn't that have been something? But I ruined it. That I broke him. All Mitsuki could do was hold onto the mother who lost her child, letting her cry her soul out. They both completely forgot about their plates of katsudon, until they had gone cold. Izuku grinned widenly as he counted the money with the small-time gang he had just worked with. It was a small job but a start. Everyone got to start off from somewhere, right? And now he was around. 3 million yen more rich. He can get this all invested into Yi new hideout. Which reminded him that he had more work tomorrow after this. Hey kid. Thanks for the help. This was a piece of cake thanks to your help. The thug with the bandana mask grinned widely as he counted the money. Yeah man, of course. You don't have one and you led us to victory like it was nothing. We beat a hero. A hero. The one with the brown hoodie cheered loudly. Deku smiled as he looked at the crooks. He lifted his bag and slung the thing over his shoulder as he started walking away. Thanks, pleasure doing business with you people. Until we meet again. The green-haired mastermind said as he started walking out of the old warehouse. The feeling is mutual, ma man. If you ever need help, please contact us. The brood of the team cheered and Deku waved at them with a nod. As he exited the warehouse, he let a large, cruel Cheshire grin into his face. It was getting better by the day. It has been 6 months since he joined the League of Villains. Yeah, the name is kinda cliché, but he and Tamura were proud of it. Soon they will start gathering members for their group. Tamura just wanted to start with some fighters and wreak havoc, but that was too small for Izuku. No, that wouldn't do. Izuku is gonna be the next all-for-one. The Emperor of Villains. And an emperor needs an empire to rule and a lot of underlings to follow him. So to start his empire, he must decide the League into branches to combat the corrupt government and those false heroes that this society worships so much. Each branch will have to be of different field, all serving the League in general and its needs. The Vanguard Action Squad, which does most of the fighting and killing with Tamura-kun as the leader, which he happily accepted the role with gusto. Then there must be something that Izuku thought the villains side needed for as long as it existed, something that heroes had over villains. Support gear and items. Izuku will make the villains as capable of accessing support gear and equipment as heroes. It's only fair to level the field after all. An intelligence, espionage and information gathering department is as necessary to be one step ahead of the heroes, to make sure none of the League of Villains' operations would be struck down by heroes. It also has the secondary purpose of gathering dirt on the heroes to expose them to the world. Oh, and a branch that specialized in heists and thefts. The League needed a money and Izuku will be dead if he kept ribbing banks as the Emperor of Villains. Izuku kept musing on those thoughts as he walked into an alleyway and went inside quickly. He made sure that no one followed him before he grabbed his phone and texted Kurogiri to open a warp gate. Satan 2, Kurogiri, please open a warp gate to this location. XXXXXXX. Chauffeur, yes, young MSTR. Just like that, a warp gate opened in front of Izuku. The quirk fascinated Izuku to no end. The ability to open warp gates to anywhere as long as you got the coordinates is something that would serve Izuku just fine. Izuku stepped into the warp gate and was enveloped in a cloud of dark mist for a second before he appeared in the familiar bar in Kamino Ward. Hey there, little brother. Tamura greeted as he playing a video game in the couch. How was the heist? Izuku rolled his eyes at his video games obsessed brother. He had no idea how someone who lived on energy drinks, fast food and video games was as deadly as he was. But considering that Izuku has taken out some pros on his own, it wasn't that outlandish. Perfect, Tamura-kun. Midnight didn't know what hit her. Literally, it was actually sad how defeated she looked when I told her I was quirkless. Izuku cackled manically as he sat on a stool facing the self-appointed resident bartender with a beaming smile, so innocent that the mist villain cursed the world for dampening such a smile. Can I get some tea, Kurogiri? Izuku asked politely and the bartender nodded his head. So, when are we starting the recruiting process? Tamura asked, not looking up from his Nintendo Switch, but he was paying attention closely to his little brother and boss. In few more months, Tamura-kun, we need resources. Money is the most valuable budget we could get. Just because Sensei can lend us as much as we need doesn't mean we should. If we are to take over the underworld and rebuild it after All Might wiped most of Sensei's followers and organizations, we should do it with our hard work. Izuku explained as he was writing on his notebook labeled, How to Destroy Hero Society No Degree 2, with extreme focus and a smile that would make all for one proud. Tamura and Kurogiri actually almost felt sorry for society as a whole, almost as the key word since Tamura didn't give a flying F about it. So what about you? Keeping tabs on the situation in the country and the crime underworld? Izuku asked casually and Tamura nodded his head. Yup, the heroes are still as fed up as ever. Nedzu and the HPSC president are still on their Cold War sheet. Oh, which reminds me that the number 3 hero Thunderbolt is assigned an HPSC representative at Udata now. Izuku scowled at that. Oh, as for the underworld, the Quirkless Liberation Front are preparing to make a move, the Creature Rejection Clan are in the same boat, and so is the Inhumane Supremacy Party. As for the Meta Liberation Army, you know how that went out. Tamura shrugged and Izuku nodded grimly. Yes, 2 months ago there was coup of the Meta Liberation Army that even though it failed did quite the number on the hero system. All Might kicked Redestros, but the media and government denied that. Why, you ask? It's because the Detronat Lifestyle Company is a great chunk of the country's economy. If Detronat is down, so is the economy. It was an absolute mess. Ever since Sensei died, in the eyes of the world all the organizations he oppressed and kept in check were making their moves. Japan was basically in a shadow war. The underground heroics joined forces into one organized community led by Eraserhead and Ms. Joke and the Nurihata. Vigilantes started a vigilante alliance that gathered all vigilantes around Japan, supported them with training and equipment, and the alliance is working side by side with the underground community. Yeah, we will have to deal with those guys later. First the kingdom building, then the decimation of those organizations. And then the domination of Japan. Izuku decided and Tamura nodded his head in affirmation. You are the boss. Your word is a law. Tamura shrugged. Kurogiri handed Izuku a teacup with hot steaming green tea in it that let out a relaxing smell. Thank you, Kurogiri. Izuku beamed as he sipped on his tea with a content smile on his freckled face. Kurogiri nodded his head as he looked at the 2 kids in front of him proudly. It made him happy to see those 2 maturing so quickly, and he knew that Emster was also watching and feeling proud of them too. Izuku got up from his seat as he stretched his limbs and walked into his bedroom. Good night, you two. I have work in the morning and will take all day, so don't wait for me. Izuku said with a smile as he walked to his room. Izuku breathed as he was standing in the training area with a katana in hand and minor scratches, bruises and cuts all over him. At least his MSTR is generous enough to heal him when he's done. Speaking of the devil. Nomu 2, destroy. All for One spoke up from his throne. One of the Nomus waiting at the edges of the room charged forward, reaching to grab Izuku, who jumped out of the way. A long and thin blade was in Izuku's hand. A rapid swing cut the Nomu's hand off. That much he had managed before, but the other hand was coming in for a punch. Even as he had swung with blade, he wasn't fast enough to dodge, so he had to settle for using said sword to block the punch, but it wasn't enough. Izuku flew backwards, feeling his bones creaking as they barely held together. He stumbled as his feet touched the ground a fraction of a second later, but this time he remained on his feet. The Nomu continued its assault, charging forward with its cut and bleeding arms spread wide. After enduring a shattered arm, that was one bear hug Izuku did not want to experience, unless the creature was planning to tear him in two. Izuku's first instinct was to scream and run. His sensei's training was to attack. With adrenaline running through his veins, Izuku charged forward, ducked under the Nomu's arms, and shoved his right hand upwards. Hot droplets fell on Izuku, making him to jump away just in time to avoid being trapped under the falling body. He crouched to stare at the Nomu, the dead Nomu, with its exposed brain split in two and not healing. Excellent. Senses it. Your first clear victory. I didn't mean to kill it. My body just moved before I had time to think. Izuku said in shock. That means you are developing proper fighting instincts. Your analytical abilities are impressive, but sometimes you must be able to just move, he declared, wailing close enough to ruffle Izuku's hair as he spoke in a softer, warmer tone. I know it is a bit shocking to you. With Kurogiri around, it is difficult for you to accept this Nomu was just a brainless creature, but you still did good. In fact, I have a gift for you. Nomu 1, bring the suitcase. The Nomu that had broken Izuku's arm before in his early matches in the start of training took a large black briefcase and brought it to the MSTR and student. The supervillain took it and held it open in front of Izuku. Izuku simply stared at the contents for a moment until he reached in and took out a black face mask reminiscent of the lower half of Sensei's helmet. It was as thick and would easily cover its user's neck, but the front had a thicker shield-like part than his sensei's. It had pipes coming from it. Is this? Heroes have their unique costumes to help in creating their public image. Many villains have them as well, but primarily to hide their identity, he said. You told Tamura you want to change the society instead of just complaining about it, something I have been proud to hear. Go take a shower and try it on while I clean up this mess. All for One said as he shooed Izuku away. Izuku took the suitcase in silence. He was grateful. Now he was honoring his MSTR by wearing a similar costume. He will start wearing it when he takes All for One. He took off his shirt stained in normal blood and took a long shower to wash the rest off himself. As he was drying with a towel, he stopped in front of the bathroom mirror to see if he had washed off everything. He stopped to stare at his reflection and wonder who was the person looking back. Some of the depressed tiredness he accumulated over the years was gone from his face, and his reflection looked older than he remembered, both his face and body, and the later was really starting to show the results of his training. His endurance was never bad, but in the past no muscles had been actually visible. Now he was at least as fit as Bakugo. Just thinking the name made his expression darken and he went back to the briefcase. Izuku changed into the new villain costume. Similarities with his father's usual dress were obvious. The color was the same and the design, but Izuku had hidden holsters in his sleeves for knives. They were more comfortable than they seemed and didn't feel like they hindered his movements. There were two exceptions to the simplistic formal look. It came with quite tall and heavy-duty metal-reinforced combat boots, and gloves which also had metal at the back of his hands, fingers pieces like brass knuckles. Izuku would have preferred red boots though. It took him a moment to put on the mask as he took a glance at the design. But eventually he put them on. Cool, he said, surprising himself with the distorted and low voice that came out of the integrated voice changer. Somehow the mask seemed to fit it, a communication device, a microphone, and what appeared to be filters for a gas mask. He returned to his MSTR. All of the low-tier nomes were gone and there wasn't as much as a bloodstain left of the dead one. It was just his sensei, Kurogiri, and Tamura-kun. Oh, brother, greeted Tamura. The young right-hand man looked at him for a moment and muttered, literally a mini-boss. Looks good, just as I expected. How does it feel? Sensei asked casually with a smile. Great, like it was custom-tailored for me, Izuku responded. That is because it was. But I never got measurements taken. I had to replace my eyes with Quirks. In some ways they are better than normal vision. Acquiring precise measurements was no problem. I even observed how you typically move. The costume was made to work as a formal wear like mine to be formal and representative, while still being simple and practical in battle. The material is fire and stab resistant, but you will need something heavier if you plan to get shot. All for One explained. Formal, Izuku muttered. When you first started teaching me you said that it's a quality of a leader? Yes. All Might may have decimated my previous empire, but many separate operations still remain, mostly information gathering, secret research, and agents running my legal cover businesses. Things that cannot easily be stopped by punching. For years I have kept them under control from a distance, but now that I am dead, it wouldn't do. Kurogiri can do only so much while the doctor is busy with other matters. All for One explained. So, you want me to take over those along the rest of your business in the underworld? Izuku summarized. Yes, you need a legal front. And who knows? It might get you more allies than you think. All for One said. Izuku nodded. Alright, consider it done. Me and Tamura-kun will handle it. We need more resources to build our empire. The League of Villains will need all the money possible. Izuku said. How do you plan on the recruiting process, my boy? All for One asked intrigued. Izuku grinned. Oh, don't worry, I already planned for that. We only need to wait until the new year starts. By then I should have gathered the resources and money necessary for the rise of my own villain empire. Izuku explained much like an excited infant showing their dad a good grade. All for One nodded. It was then that Garaki came with a grin. Hello, my lord and young lord. I came to talk about the new project. Garaki said with a grin. Young lord, you are a genius. A genius. The second-generation nomes are a success. All for One looked surprised at that, but in a good way, while Izuku beamed. That's amazing, doctor. I am very happy that my idea was useful. Izuku said happily. Useful? Useful? Doctor asked like the word was an insult to everything he stood for. Young lord, you gave us a new perceptive. Those second-generation nomis are to say the least gonna make making an army much faster and easier. Doctor cheered. The entire second generation was born when Izuku pointed out that if the Nomu creation process, which he was incredibly uncomfortable with, damages higher brain function, then perhaps using creatures who generally aren't very dependent on said brain functions made more sense. Basically animals, because Nedzu is a proof that animals could have quirks. Dr. Face palmed at the idea. Or at least he tried to. He froze mid-move and made the, oh my all for one why I didn't think of this earlier, face. The result was an entire line of nomus built upon animals that developed quirks, and thus could be given more, but not sapience. Buying a dog with some minimal quirk on the internet was also significantly less problematic than kidnapping someone from the street. Izuku is still waiting for the right moment to inform the good doctor that he is only marginally less uncomfortable with the second-gen nomus and that it's probably the time to do something less manically evil. His sensei gave him the green light to do as he pleased. It didn't matter to the old supervillain anymore. He was going to retire the second Izuku succeeded in the project. Project Absorb for Occupy, which Doctor was way too giddy with. But in all honesty, so was Izuku. So, let me get this straight. You hired me to help you rob a bank. Yup. Okay, but was there any point in making off with the ATM machine? Hey. That's just how we roll, kid. You should have known what you were signing up for when you chose to ride with Team Reservoir Dogs. The band of multicolored bad guys hollered together. Deku put a hand to his face. His debut, and it's helping a hero of Myron's. Not all that flashy, but he guessed he'd have to start somewhere. He just didn't expect his first clients to be so hyped. So, here he was, riding in the back of a pickup truck, with a cash register, as well as the counter it sat upon, with a bunch of thugs who had clearly watched too many movies. They even went so far as to give themselves nicknames for the heist. Man, did you see the look on that clerk's face when we ripped the machine out of the floor? Mr. Green, a punk teen with a spiked ginger mohawk and a face mask with a green stripe down the front, reveled as he lifted the counter up into the back of a truck. Yeah. He even tried to go for the silent alarm. All I had to do was lean over him, and he nearly wet his breathes. Mr. Yellow, the biggest of the bunch, wearing a torn-up ski mask with a yellow pointed nose, bellowed as he heaved the counter up from in the cargo bed of the vehicle. Too bad we didn't get to fight any heroes, though. I would have loved to see this guy's quirk in action. Mr. Blue, who wore a blue headband that held his towering brown hairdo, mentioned as he hiked a thumb at the young analyst in the back. Yeah. Looks like we didn't need your help after all, bunny boy. Mr. Red, wearing a black eye mask with 3 red horns sticking out the forehead, reveled as he got into the driver's seat. And since no heroes showed up, you don't get a cut of the job. They're not bunny ears, they're supposed to be hair strands, Deku grumbled. He really should have seen this coming. Deku didn't mention it out loud, but it was supposed to be a play on his old costume look, since before, he wanted to look like All Might as much as possible. This was his way of making himself out to be the opposite of what the symbol of peace stood for. The anti-All Might, if you will. But he had to admit, apart from the glaringly obvious design flaws, the outfit came out great. Whoever it was that made it had followed his designs to the T. He had a new green hoodie, where the hair strands/bunny ears were sewn onto the top, along with a face mask with a toothy grin printed on the front, which was modified to be a gas mask and voice modulator in one. A pair of red-tinted goggles covered his eyes, with a pair of dark green combat trousers and his trademark red shoes completing the ensemble. Second, even if no heroes showed up, don't think you can cut me out of my pay on a technicality. The green-haired boy noted. And third of all, I don't have a quirk that points out the weaknesses of heroes. Say what? Mr. Red took his eyes off the road to look back at the young analyst, a raised eyebrow under his face mask. Then what is your quirk? Deku sighed. Tamura gave him the advice of not telling his partners in heists about his little problem. That it could drive away his customers, as well as his chance of becoming a top-ranked villain before he could even start. The young analyst knew that just because he was lucky enough to come across a few crooks who didn't care about his lack of superpowers, didn't mean that every criminal would welcome him with open arms. However, keeping a secret and lying were two different things. Lying amongst villains is a sure way to land yourself in hot water. So, clearing his throat, Deku prepared to expose his quirkless nature and braced himself for the predicted ridicule and refusal of payment. Well, the truth is, look out. Deku's sudden warning arrived too late, as a massive figure came out of nowhere and ambushed the moving vehicle. The van struck the giant form, skidding across the tarmac of the road until it slowed to a stop. Everyone inside had been thrown out of their seats, groaning in pain as they came back to their senses. "Everybody okay?" Mr. Green asked as he rubbed his now sore neck. "I think so," Mr. Blue answered as he nursed his namesake. Our Yellow shook his head, his cheeks smacking together as he did. "What the heck was that?" Mr. Red lifted his head from the steering wheel. He blinked a few times to get his bearings back, but then immediately wished he didn't. Guys? Problem? What is it?" Mr. Blue turned to the front of the truck to see what or more exactly, who it was that they ended up crashing into. "Oh crud." Mr. Yellow raised a trembling finger at the muscle-bound build before them. "Is that is that who I think it is?" It's. Mr. Green was too terrified to get his words out, but Deku, with wide rage-filled hateful eyes, was able to answer for him. "Death Arms." The heavy-lifting hero smirked. He had taken the brunt of the truck's collision in stride, appearing to have suffered zero damage. Wearing a blue, unbuttoned muscle shirt, with his trademark yellow and black headband and wrist guards, he grabbed the battered truck by both sides and lifted it off the ground. Deku and the team tumbled over one another as the heavy-lifting hero hoisted them into the air. "And here I thought I was gonna miss my workout today." Death Arms then threw the truck across the street. The truck landed on its wheels, but the momentum of the heavy-lifting hero's toss kept it in an out-of-control spin. The gang screamed for their lives as the truck collided with an oncoming lamppost. Mr. Red got a faceful of the airbag when the truck made its sudden stop. He lay forward on the steering wheel, putting pressure on the horn as it let out an unending honk. He awoke from his sudden concussion, only to see Death Arms coming their way, cracking his knuckles with sadistic glee. "That we're done for." The leader paled at the sight of the enclosing hero. "We're done for. It's all over. We're going to jail. We're going to the emergency room first." Mr. Blue grimaced. "Death Arms is famous for pounding on villains for the heck of it. We'll be lucky to even survive this. What are you waiting for, kid? Get out there and do your job." Mr. Green shoved the oversized crook toward the back doors. With an eye roll, Izuku stepped up to the looming hero, who looked down on him more than just because of his enormous height. "Go for it, bunny boy." Mr. Red cheered from the window. "Take that oversized muscle head down." Death Arms scoffed. "Bunny boy? Really? Is that your villain name?" "Not really, call me Green Rabbit." Izuku introduced himself with a flourish. He liked the act like he was on stage. It might be the old-age villains from comics that his sensei introduced him to, but what will you do? It felt great when he made a show. Death Arms scoffed. "Wow, there's no creativity in that name," the hero said, annoyed. Death Arms reached down and took one of the strands of cloth of his hood in his oversized finger and thumb, lifting it straight to get a good look. He smirked condescendingly. "What are these supposed to be? Your little bunny ears?" Izuku's eye twitched at the question. For FS sake, didn't it really look like the all-might strands of hair this much? He was half ready to grab his combat knife and shove it right down this a-hole's throat, but that's not what he came here for. Izuku turned to the thugs and called out to them in a casual way, like he wasn't facing the towering figure of the punching hero. "Hey, grab your phones and record this. I'll get you an extra share if record the whole thing," Izuku said with a grin, not that anyone could see it beneath his mask. "What the heck are you doing, bunnyhead?" Mr. Green yelled in outrage, half tempted to get out of the truck and smack the boy one. "Snap out of it. You're supposed to beat heroes, not make a FING show." Izuku just turned around and shrugged. "This is my villain debut, man. Give me a break and get to work already, or come fight him yourselves." Izuku said with a playful tone, and the team shivered in fear at the idea. Their faces pales from the idea of facing death arms, so Hey grabbed their phones and started recording. You really have a death wish, don't you, bunny boy? Death arms snapped as he cracked his knuckles with a warning glare that didn't intimidate Izuku in the slightest. Then come and take me in, Izuku said cheerfully as he held up his hands for the hero, and the thieves started yelling at him, but he didn't care. Death Arms on the other hand indulged in the offer as he grabbed HNDCFFS and moved to Izuku. Izuku looked back up at the hero, who was taking his sweet time in taking him in. He was moving slow, really slow. It was so pathetic. So slow that it was all too easy for him to step out of his way. What the? Death Arms asked no one as he tried to grab the boy again. The green-hooded mastermind stepped out of his path again. Hey! Death Arms tried again and again. But every time, the boy would step out of his way at the last second. The heck's gotten into you, kid? Deku was starting to think the guy was pathetic. Wasn't he supposed to fight instead of talk? As he dodged Death Arms's meaty fingers once again, it was in fact a piece of cake after a whole year of fighting Nomus. All of the training he'd received over the last year had come to his aid. He was actually giving Death Arms a hard time. He was brought back to the matter at hand when Death Arms gave a guttural roar and threw a closed fist toward him. Izuku just jumped out of its path, letting Death Arms strike the ground where he was once standing. Once Deku landed on his feet, he took in his surroundings quickly and spotted an alleyway. He turned his attention back to Team Reservoir Dogs, who were all agape at the performance the green-haired boy was pulling off. You guys get out of here. I'll handle this. With that final order, Izuku took off down the alleyway with enough speed to impress Ingenium, forgetting that he was making a show to the camera. Death Arms snapped his head between the frozen dogs and the retreating Izuku. Wounded pride won over his better judgment as he went after the villain in training. Get back here, you little punk. Team Reservoir Dogs was still stunned in place until Mr. Green snapped out of it and smacked Mr. Red upside his head. What are you waiting for, man? Move it. All right. Mr. Red caught himself and started the engine, which miraculously came to life with a deafening rev. The leader of the pack turned to the rest of the gang. He put the pedal to the metal and sped down the road to where the alleyway would exit out. Deku kept running for his life. He chanced to look behind him, and as he expected, Death Arms was still on his tail, charging after him like a mad bull. While Deku hopped and skipped over any stray garbage bins and dumpsters in his way, Death Arms bulldozed through all obstacles in his way. Soon enough, Deku came out the other end of the alley. He raised a hand to his face as the sun hit him in the eyes. Once he adjusted to the light, he took in his new surroundings. Across the street was an empty construction site, with a towering construct of girders sealed together. The thundering of Death Arms' stampede made itself known to the boy, growing louder as the hero drew closer. Deku raced across the street and into the construction site, right before Death Arms burst out of the alley, with brick and garbage flying everywhere on his arrival. The heavy-lifting hero spotted Deku heading to the site and gave no second thought as he chased after him. The fact that a scrawny little string bean made a fool of him was not sitting well with the heavy-lifting hero. No one made a fool out of Death Arms, and this kid was going to learn that the hard way. As Death Arms charged into the building site, Team Reservoir Dogs pulled up outside, catching the heavy-lifting hero still after the green-hooded kid. They spotted the boy and behemoth in the construction site, and Mr. Blue began scrambling around his pockets until he found what he was looking for. He pulled out his phone and turned the camera on. He did not want to miss a second of this or the boy might break his legs. Death Arms finally caught up with the kid and started swinging his fists wildly, wanting nothing more than to beat the painted-on smirk off the child's face. Deku grinned to himself as he ducked and weaved past all of the heavy-lifting hero's blows. Deku was running circles around Death Arms, hopping and skipping over and under the massive man's muscular limbs. The dogs watching from afar were in awe of what they were seeing, with Mr. Blue catching every moment on his phone. Stand still, you little turd. Death Arms bellowed as he slammed his fists down like a pair of sledgehammers. Deku somersaulted out of the way, a blast of dirt and rock erupting from the hero's enraged attack. The villain in training took deep breaths as he peered through the clearing dust. Death Arms heaved haggard breaths of his own, his massive body rising and falling as he glared daggers at the green-hooded boy. His eyes were bloodshot and crazed, sweat dripping down his brow and his teeth bared and grinding together like a wild animal. Needless to say, Death Arms was ticked off. Deku took in the sight of the man's body. The guy was built like a tank, and there was no way he was going to be able to get under his skin with his small stature, no matter how much practice he had against the Nomus, especially that he wasn't trying to cut the hero's throat open. A light bulb seemed to go off in the boy's head, and an eager grin splitting across his hidden lips. Deku reached behind his back and retrieved something he'd been dying to try out since it handed to him when he got his costume. The green-hooded boy took in the sight of his new taser knuckle in his left hand. A pair of battery cylinders fixed into the modified handle were wired up to the carbon fiber paddle, where two exposed electrodes stuck out of either side of the head of the device. It was similar to some vigilante called Knuckle Duster who fights villains Quirks and Izuku admired. Deku turned his attention back to Death Arms, who was now charging at him with bulging crazed eyes, and a little drool flying from his mouth. Deku decided to meet the heavy-lifting hero halfway, rushing straight for him with his new weapon clutched tightly in his hand. Mr. Blue zoomed in his camera as the two foes headed straight for one another, desperate to get a clear shot of whatever would happen next. He saw it. He recorded it. But no matter how many times he'd play it back, he still couldn't believe what he saw next. Death Arms lunged at the boy with an open arm, intending to clothesline the little green runt. Deku saw the attack coming a mile away, getting down on his knees and sliding under his arm, leaning his head back with his chin mere inches from the oversized hero's passing knuckle. Deku shot back to his feet, taking in the sight of Death Arms' exposed midsection. He pulled his arm back and held down the trigger to his new weapon. A crackle of electricity met the boy's, as well as the heavy-lifting hero's, ears. As Death Arms turned back, it was too late. Deku jammed his taser knuckle into Death Arms' ribs, a loud buzz going off the moment the device made an impact. Never had the outcry of a hero, in utter agony, sound so disturbingly delightful to the green-hooded villain. Death Arms clutched at his stinging side, which gave Deku an opening to plunge his new weapon into the heavy-lifting hero's chest, causing Death Arms to let out another wail of pain. Deku hopped back as he took in the sight of what he'd done. He almost couldn't believe it. He did this. He brought Death Arms, a pro hero, to his knees. Holy cow! Mr. Red gasped at the sight of the heavy-lifting hero hunched over. He noticed Mr. Blue to his side, still catching everything on his camera phone. Tell me you're getting this? I'm getting it, I'm getting it. Mr. Blue affirmed as he kept the bunny boy and Death Arms in his shot. The heavy-lifting hero turned back to see the team watching him from afar, one of them recording his most humiliating moment of hero work on his phone. Shame overcame the hero like a wave until he looked back at the boy who made a fool of him since the start. Shame and embarrassment turned to blind, burning fury. Death Arms rose to his feet, his enormous stature blocking out the sun and casting a looming shadow over the young villain. Yet for some reason, Deku could feel nothing but elation. Dare to say, he was actually not having fun. I'm putting you behind bars. Death Arms rose his fist high over his head. But not before I put you in a W. Death Arms charged at Deku, swinging his hulking limbs at the boy, desperate to get even one hit on him. But Deku denied him at every chance, backing away until the two were under the structure of the site itself. The dogs got out of the truck and hurried over to get a better view of the fight, Mr. Blue still holding up his device. He got a good shot of Deku hopping over Death Arms and delivering a knee to the back of his head, sending the heavy-lifting hero face-first into an oncoming girder, the impact causing an echoing ring. Deku took notice of how the structure around him began to shake all around him and the hero. It was then that his calculative mind kicked in. Death Arms is a hero who prides himself on his strength, being able to lift abnormally heavy objects without a struggle. Was that because he was just that powerful, or did it have something to do with his quirk? Deku decided to investigate. He reached up to his mask and turned a small knob, which raised the volume of his modulator. What's the matter, Death Arms? Having trouble keeping up? Maybe you shouldn't have skipped leg day. The heavy-lifting hero's response was to snarl and lunge at the boy, who all too easily ducked and rolled out of his way. In Death Arm's blind rage, he had knocked a girder supporting the building frame around them. Deku led Death Arms around the area, tricking him into smashing more of the structure's legs, with Death Arms too furious to notice. "I'm gonna rip those bunny ears right off your head." Death Arms threw one more punch toward the slippery rabbit boy. One more punch that Deku easily avoided at the last second. One more punch that collided with the fragile structure over the heavy-lifting hero's head. One more punch to start bringing the place down. Death Arms finally stopped seeing red long enough to notice the construct of metal beams starting to creak and groan. The structure of girders started to wane on itself, until one by one, the formation started to crumble. Death Arms was in the dead center of the construction, as a pile of girders fell right on top of him. But thanks to his signature super strength, Death Arms was able to hold up the load. However, more beams kept raining down on him as the structure around him continued to collapse. Death Arms groaned under the pressure, wincing as he once again fell to his knees. It was at that moment when the one who he had been trying to pulverize appeared before him. Death Arms looked up into the concealed eyes of Deku. Even though his face was hidden, the heavy-lifting hero could feel the smirk spread across the boy's face. "I had a feeling there was more to your quirk than just simple super strength," the young analyst deduced. "It only allows you to lift a specific amount of weight until your body can't take any more." Death Arms's anger started to rise once more, giving him a small boost of empowerment as he attempted to lift himself with the weight on his shoulders. "Why that you little? How much weight does your quirk allow you to handle, I wonder? 2 tons? 4 tons? The green-hooded boy tilted his head to one side as he investigated the mass of stacked metal the hero was holding up. "By my estimate, that has to be about 6 to 7 tons of weight, give or take. When I get out of this, I'm gonna..." Death Arms' threat died in his throat when the green-hooded villain produced a single pen from his pocket. From the look in the kid's eye from behind his goggles, Death Arms had a nasty idea of what he intended on doing with it. "And now hold on a second, kid. You don't have to do this. W can work something out. I can get you time off your sentence. How does that sound?" Deku tapped the pen against his bottom lip in mock thought, the red plastic reflecting in the sunlight with a deadly red glint. "Did I just hear that right? The great and powerful Death Arms bargaining with a lowly villain like myself? Just when you thought you've heard it all." The green-hooded boy stepped up to the trapped do-gooder, leaning in close until the two were face to face. "I think the pressure's starting to get to you, Death Arms. Seemed it. You don't want to do this. You don't want to be a hero killer." The heavy-lifting hero's reasoning was to sound more like begging to the green-hooded villain. "Oh, don't be such a baby." Deku waved off. "This much weight won't be enough to kill you, but I doubt you'll be doing any hero work for the next few months." Death Arms had this kid all wrong. He wasn't crazy, he was out of his freaking mind. "You know, if you can't even take down a bunch of small-time crooks like us." The quirkless child motioned to himself and the dogs watching from afar. "Then maybe you don't have what it takes for this job after all." The heavy-lifting hero's fear morphed into terror when the boy took off his mask and goggles, revealing an expression of pure, unrestrained malice and madness. "Maybe you should leave the heroics. The real heroes." Deku's cruel smirk turned into full-blown unhinged grin. "After all, if you couldn't defeat a quirkless middle schooler, then you're not worth you payment. But let me introduce you to the one who beat you before you go down." "What?" Deku did a flourish as he grinned. "I am Deku Shigaraki, the future king of the underworld. The one who will burn down this society and create a better one from its ashes. The emperor of all villains. Karma," Deku declared. The team looked gaping at the declaration, but for some reason they just knew he was serious. Deku placed his pen on Death Arms's load. "Karma caught up to you, Death Arms?" "No dash." The hero's outcry was drowned out by the collapsing clutter of iron beams finally getting the better of him. Dust and debris filled the area, making the dogs shield their eyes. When the noise died down and the dust began to clear, the team looked back to see an unimaginable sight. There stood the green-hooded villain, standing tall in front of a pile of destroyed construction. Beneath the mess of metal was the heavy-lifting hero, Death Arms. His eyes were rolled to the back of his head. His face was stuck in a silent scream. A sliver of saliva leaked from his gaping jaw, where a few missing teeth could be seen. The boy stood before the defeated hero for a little while longer, until he finally decided to walk away. He left behind the battered and beaten hero, who when it mattered most, stood by and did nothing when he ran out and did his job for him. If your job is to help people, then shut up and help them. Everyone clearly heard the words the quirkless child declared into the heavens. Deku walked out of the demolished construction site, and up to the still gaping Team Reservoir Dogs. The team turned to the boy. They were dead silent as Mr. Blue lowered his phone and shut it off with a beep, but then the dogs all erupted into cheers and howls of ecstatic awe. Guys? Guys? Deku's voice was drowned out by the team's hollering until he turned up his modulator. Guys! Team Reservoir Dogs froze at the booming voice. They all turned to the child villain who took down Death Arms. I think we should get going? Deku suggested as the sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance. Adaro. Right. Mr. Red was the first to grasp the situation. Alright guys, do as the kid says. Team Reservoir Dogs, move out. The team scrambled into the truck, with Mr. Green and Yellow helping Deku up. Mr. Red floored the gas pedal, with the truck screeching into movement as they raced off from the scene long before the authorities showed up. Holy cow, kid! That was amazing! Mr. Red slapped the steering wheel in astonishment. You took down Death Arms. The Death Arms. Mr. Blue then held the camera to take clear shot of Deku as he made dramatic pose. Hello there, rejects of society. For years we have been oppressed by those sickos called heroes. Beaten down for being different. Those with weak, mutant, villainous quirks or no quirks at all. If you want to change society, then seek the League of Villains. It's where you will find salvation. Izuku declared to the camera. I, Deku Shigaraki, the future king of the underworld, will start my own villain organization to stand up to the injustice this society has gone into. Mr. Blue uploaded the video into the internet quickly as Deku finished. Tamura got himself situated into his favorite couch and put all his snacks and energy drinks into the small table in front of him, ready for a nice 7 hours gaming session, much to Kurogiri's dismay. He started the gaming console, but much to his despair and Kurogiri's petty amusement, the console needed some time to download some much-needed upgrades to the system. With a chain of curses profane enough to set someone's hair on fire, he grabbed his phone and started scrolling through it for anything worth his time. He took a sip of his drink just to spit it all out, alarming Kurogiri. Tamura Shigaraki. Is everything alright? The must villain asked in alarm, and Tamura motioned for him to come and see. The Nomu did as instructed and looked at the fanatic gamer's phone, and his yellow misty eyes widened in shock at the title of the video. It was a video entitled, Quirkless Villain Dunks on Death Arms and Declares War on Japan. They were beyond astonished as the video portrayed their boss, dancing circles around the heavy-lifting hero himself, striking him with some kind of electric device, then leaving him to be buried in a ton of construction site debris. Then they both saw his declaration and gaped. Kurogiri found himself taking a few steps back in his stupefied state. I can't believe my eyes. Is that the boss? Tamura questioned out loud, his mind struggling to accept that this was indeed the same green-haired ball of nerves he'd gotten to know over the 10 months. Tamura knew his lil bro was tough and had a large brain that would make Netsu think twice in a chess match, but this was FING amazing. They weren't the only ones to be shocked, amazed, or appalled by the footage of the young villain. The video became an instant hit overnight, its view count skyrocketing into the millions. The press eventually caught wind of the viral hit, displaying it for all to see. Needless to say, the video became a PR nightmare for Hero Society almost instantly. The video was eventually taken down by the website supervisors, but the lasting image of a battered and bruised hero was burned into the public's mind, as well as the vision of the green-hooded villain that was soon given the name by the public as the Green Rabbit. But that was just the beginning. In other news, the mysterious villain known only as the Green Rabbit has struck again. When the pro-hero, Airjet, attempted to stop a daylight bank robbery, he was intercepted by the virescent vandal, who tampered with his signature jetpack and sent the airborne hero flying into the window of an office building. We go live to Suki Monogatari, who is on the scene. Thanks, Miyagi. 2 hours ago, a clash between the law and lawless took place here in front of the First International Bank of Mizudafu. A gang of villains, led by the increasingly infamous Green Rabbit, attempted a daylight robbery, tearing down the vault door and making off with over 2 billion yen in cash. The airborne pro-hero, Airjet, arrived on the scene and attempted to put a stop to the gang's escapade. The Green Rabbit engaged the hero, showing feats of athleticism that would put many other pro-heroes to shame, as he dodged the hero's air blasts from his arm cannons. Unfortunately for Airjet, his efforts to stop the acrobatic assailant were in vain. After avoiding the hero's attacks, the Green Rabbit managed to inflict his own damage, rupturing the airborne hero's trademark jetpack, sending the airborne hero flying into a nearby office window. The Green Rabbit and his associates have long since made their escape, leaving emergency responders to come to the hero's rescue. We have been told that Airjet will make a full recovery, but his reputation has more than certainly taken a nosedive. Airjet hasn't been the only hero that the Green Rabbit has proven to be more of a match for. After making his debut 7 weeks ago after bringing down the heavy-lifting hero, Death Arms, he has gone on to become a well-known name among hero society. In a dark bar in the south of Mizudafu, a madman grinned ecstatically as he watched with twisted admiration the quirkless boy who saw what made a true hero, what was wrong with this society that worships the fakes, and decided to take action against it. Stain was truly intrigued by this boy. He would like to meet him, maybe even join him. Before the viral video was removed from the web, courtesy of the site's owners, as well as the HPSC, there was speculation over social media on whether or not the Green Rabbit was possibly quirkless. Before the viral video was removed from the web, courtesy of the site's owners, as well as the HPSC, there was speculation over social media on whether or not the Green Rabbit was possibly quirkless. Mizuki slammed his fist as watched the news. This boy that he was truly the nightmare for the law enforcement department. All their efforts to stabilize hero society is going out of the window. If this keeps up with the Meta Liberation Army, the Creature Rejection Clan, Inhuman Supremacy Party and Quirkless Liberation Front, Japan will go into war. Kamui Woods tried to fight the Green Rabbit, but the poor hero was set on fire by the brutal mastermind who used a lighter and a hairspray bottle. A young man with charcoal black hair stared down into his phone, the light from the screen illuminating the flayed and scarred skin around his eyes and mouth. The burned boy chuckled as he watched the green-hooded kid set the wood hero on fire for the umpteenth time that night. Now that's funny. Breaking news. The Green Rabbit has struck again. Breaking into a company that specializes in support gear and left with more than enough to start an army. The mysterious villain was intercepted by the pro-hero Vlad King, but the villain proved to be superior as he beat down the hero with just a combat knife and giving the hero multiple slashes across whole body. The screen showed Green Rabbit covered in blood as he threw Vlad King out of the building into a dumpster. Ugh! Look at all that blood. A young girl with a pair of messy blonde buns atop her head grinned into her phone, a pair of fangs gleaming in the dark of the alleyway she was loitering in. Her extra-large white cardigan was drenched in crimson, protecting the sailor-styled school uniform underneath. She trembled as she watched the green-hooded boy covered in the hero's blood. Her smile grew wider as blood splattered across the boy's face, helping to decorate his expression. He's just so cute and dreamy. I could just eat him. We have here several footage of the young man that declares himself to be the next king of villains, stating to be truly and utterly quirkless. And considering that there are no signs of quirk usage, it might just be true. A middle-aged man sat on a large leather sofa in front of a large plasma screen TV in a spotless meeting room. The beak-shaped plague doctor mask covering his mouth did nothing to hide the astonishment in his golden yellow eyes. The masked man slowly stood from his seat, walking around a coffee table as he kept his gaze on the quirkless villain on screen, watching as he fought the water hero backdraft, striking him with fierce verbosity. The man stepped up to the screen and placed a hand on the quirkless child's hooded face. Yes. Although it is hard to imagine with how the rabbit has managed to get the upper hand on many pro-heroes since his appearance, the footage and the boy's self-declarations can be seen as proof of the boy's quirkless nature. There were no signs of any quirk activation or use during his fights, showing that the green rabbit has a plethora of talent and experience in combating quirks. A man with a pointed nose and thinning, spiked ginger hair, wearing a sharp black suit and tie, grinned wistfully at his television set, while sat behind a large desk in a lavished office. He watched as the young criminal brutalized the pro-hero in front of thousands. Though he held a gentle smile on his face, his right hand was clenched and trembling. As the report continued to play, Guran was on cloud 9. He was surrounded by bustling villains, handing over and taking in more money than he could count, inspired by the boy to take action themselves or asking for the League of Villains. His gap tooth was on full display with the enormous pleased grin on his face. As he handled his customers' cash, he turned his head up to face the TV once more. He caught sight of Deku taking down Ingenium by making him run into a wall. The villain broker had a feeling he was going to be having a lot more customers than even now in the near future. He laughed among the money running through his fingers, smoke billowing from his lips from his cigarette. Oh, yet business was about to get real good. The current king of the underworld was hooked up to his medical appliances as he chuckled in dark delight. He watched as Izuku Midoriya, or now Deku Shigaraki, the quirkless villain whom he took as his ward, was making a name for himself. His chuckling leads to a fierce coughing fit, a bit of blood escaping his dry lips. He merely wiped the red liquid away as a picture of the quirkless villain appeared. "Oh, my boy, you truly are something special." The old villain turned around. "Garaki, it's time to prepare the operation room. It's time for project, absorb for occupy, to get going. I've brought up the new recruits. I must say, Deku, your show with all those heroes and your bold claims made things really easy. Hope they're what you're looking for," Guran said with a grin as he entered the bar fooled by two figures. "Just bring them in already." Tamura was still in a bad mood. Deku won their last match. 1 win out of 172 losses, but Deku teased him to no end. It's fair payback considering that Tamura always did the same thing. Soon after, the group walked in. A man full of burned scars and a teen in a school uniform with the brightest smile on her entered with the info broker. Deku felt excited. He couldn't wait to know their quirks. "Let me introduce them. This one's name and face have been hidden by the media, but she's a suspect in a series of deaths by blood loss. Her name is Toga Himiko." Jiren started motioning to the girl. She had ash blonde hair tied up in 2 messy buns. She had sharp canines that was on full display thanks to her wide smile. "You're Green Rabbit, aren't you? I admire you so much. All bloodied up and badass." She blushed at the mere thought of it. The girl moved to Deku while bouncing on her feet. She was humming to herself as she did. Once she reached the young mastermind, she held his cheek with her left hand. "I want to make the world an easier place to live. So please let me join the League of Villains. And can I stab you?" Toga said with a bright smile on her face that had a sadistic and slightly crazy glint to it. Deku first turned red and covered his face. He's talking to a girl. But as she spoke, he noticed her developed canines. Maybe it's part of her quirk. When she asked if she could stab him, curiosity took over and he could only answer, "Sure." Deku smiled widely and brightly like the sun itself, eager to see her quirk in action. "Just choose a place that won't kill me, please," he added a bit hesitantly, not wanting to be murdered, even if it was by such a pretty girl. Her look was that of immeasurable surprise. Like something that she didn't even consider possible just happened in front of her. "Did you just say yes?" Toga asked, bewildered look in her pretty face, her eyes wide in shock at what she jumped as he heard. "Great. You're all a bunch of crazies." The burned man interrupted. "Are you really the person in the vids against the pros?" Deku proceeded to ignore him. The green-headed mastermind stepped into the burned man's personal space with immeasurable that would make Ingenium impressed and examined him thoroughly, making him back off slightly in reflex with a cautious expression. "Oh, such scars." Deku squinted to examine the burn marks. "You must have a weakness to fire. There are a few candidates for your quirk, obviously not a cold-blooded mutant type since you don't show any outward appearances. Deku already had his notebook out. His nearly impossible to understand rumbling had started. Emitter or transformation. Emitter is more common, and out of those the most likely candidate is. He closed his notebook. Do you have an ice quirk? Can you generate ice or just control it? The man who had not introduced himself had a surprised look. Not nearly to the same extent as Toga, but still noticeable. Now is it because Deku got his quirk right or because Toga had decided to stab him? Maybe it's how she drank the blood on the blade afterwards? All those questions turned into new ones as she turned into an exact copy of Deku with a high school uniform over his own clothes. You can transform into whoever you drink the blood of? That's so cool. Is that why you like blood? Or why you want to see people covered in blood? Does it have to be their blood? Asking the wrong questions. How long does it last? Would you pass a DNA test? Fingerprints? Do you get their quirks? Can you undo your quirk willingly, or do you have to wait until time runs out? No. Does time even run out? Your clothes didn't transform. Deku's rambling stopped, and his blush came back stronger than ever. Does that mean that, for you to properly use your quirk, you have to get N naked? He barely managed to finish his sentence. Both Tamura and the burned man laughed hysterically, both enjoying Deku's flustered expression. Guess you really are the age you look. Name's Dabi. I wonder if a kid like you and the guy who beat all these heroes really are the same person? You got my quirk wrong, by the way. A blue flame lit up in his hand. A fire quirk? But he definitely maybe has a weakness to fire. How is this possible? One quick way to find out. The man smirked and the flame grew. Kurogiri. He was quick to react to Deku's call and involve the newcomers and Deku in his fog. After a few moments he dispersed it. He found Dabi with a knife through his hand and a katana pointed at his throat. Toga was back to normal. She was still smiling. That's impressive. You really are that hot warrior. Dabi, don't burn him. Burns don't make him bleed. They're not cute at all. Toga whined with a pout that helped decorate her features into a new level of cuteness. You use flames like that in a bar full of alcohol and we're the crazy ones? Deku was angry. It was evident in his tone. You really do move just like the vids. Sorry about that. Needed to be sure. Also, I wouldn't hit the bar. I have good control over my fire. Dabi said with a grin as he looked Deku apologetically. He raised his hands in a surrendered way. What about her? Could you have avoided hitting her when she was right beside me? Deku said with a scowl, motioning to Toga with his head, and she waved at him, making him blush much to Dabi's amusement. It seems the mist guy and crusty lips are also amused. Nope, but see this? He raises his stabbed hand. We had a few minor disagreements before coming here. She's as fast as you. She wouldn't be caught in that. Dabi assured. Deku sighed and lowered his blade. You could have waited a bit. I was planning on testing you guys. In a safer, less flammable place. I'm Deku Shigaraki. The villain emperor, Karma. Your new boss. He extends his hand and gave a smile. Dabi shakes it. That annoyed-looking person over there who hasn't moved a finger despite seeing his best friend and little brother threatened by blue flames is the League's second-in-command and leader of the Vanguard Action Squad, Tamura Shigaraki. You're fine, aren't you? I was more worried about having to dispose of the corpses of our new acquaintances. Tamura drawled as he gave Dabi a look that said, bullet-dodged moron, that Dabi picked on and kept a mental note on. Finally he spoke. He's been awfully quiet ever since I effortlessly kicked his butt. Deku made sure to emphasize the last part towards Tamura, who huffed. Which reminds me. Deku's expression grew serious as he held a controller. Before I officially welcome you into the League, do any of you play video games? Izuku asked, his face melting into a smile. Toga grinned and nodded vigorously. With that, all of them started playing together. Alright, these are the last two. Jiren said with smiles as he entered the bar. Jiren walked in with a blonde with a scar on his eye and a man in a stray jacket. Take that. I'm back on the throne. Try and make fun of me now. Tamura yelled in triumph. He hasn't smiled this much in a while. And it hurt his lips, but it felt good to win. Next time I wanna be on Deku's team. Toga pouted. Sheet. Dabi. You threw me off. We're supposed to be a team. Deku complained. Don't pin this on me. You're the one who stole the power-up. Dabi argued. Everyone ignored Gueren. They were too caught up in the team tournament. Kurogiri stopped their fun. Tomura Shigaraki. Young Gueren has brought up the last two. You should greet the newest members. Kurogiri reminded sternly. Deku didn't seem pleased by their arrival. Tomura also went from triumphant to cold neutral. These two would be strong allies, but neither of them thought they were the type of people they want in the league. The only reason Deku brought them is because they needed disposable pawns in their board. Kurogiri. Be ready just in case. Deku instructed sternly, and the bartender nodded his head as he narrowed his yellow misty eyes at the two arrivals. The duo headed to greet them. Tomura took his gloves off and Deku grabbed his. Kana. Hello and welcome to the League of Villains. You must be Muscular and Moonfish. I'm Deku and this is Shigaraki Tomura. Please feel free to roam around and relax. Deku greeted politely with a smile on his face. You're Deku Shigaraki? The Green Rabbit? The man who single-handedly crushed Death Arms, Air Jet, Kamui Woods and many others? The one with enough ball to declare himself the future king of the underworld. The blonde had a skeptical look on his face. He couldn't believe that the little punk in front of him was anything like what he was boasting to be. He looked too small and nice to be a villain, but in second glance he had that hidden aura of a dangerous murderer that you see in the worst of villains. That's me. He gave his warmest smile. The first fake smile he gave since he met Sensei. He wasn't a fan of this two villains, they weren't the type he sympathized with. They were nothing but psychotic murderers. The blonde responded by muscling up his arm and hammer it into Deku's head. He was fast and he was strong. There was blood on the ground. A lot of blood on the ground. Maybe you can gimme a fight. Come on. Show me some blood. The blonde villain yelled out manically as he grinned sadistically. Not fair. I want their flesh tea-dash. Moonfish began his rant about to activate his quirk but was stopped. Tomura moved before he finished his sentence. He forced his hand over Moonfish's mouth, withholding a single finger. You know my quirk? It allows me to turn things I touch with 5 fingers to dust. There will be no flesh left if I feel a single tooth. The entire league started to move but Tomura stopped them. Stay where you are. Tomura commanded with all the authority of a leader. What do you mean? Didn't that fucktard smash Lord Deku to a bloody pulp on the floor? How are you so calm? Spinner was ready for a fight. He was a Deku fanboy and his idol was seemingly just killed. He looked ready for war. Idiot. That blood isn't his. Tomura scoffed as he motioned to the two confusing the league. Ha! You're faster than me? You managed to cut me as you dodged? You're amazing, Deku. Let's fight to the death. Come on. Muscular turned to speak to Deku who was standing behind the big man. From the sudden start of the fight and the difference in their physiques, nobody saw him pointing his katana from behind Muscular. With a cold expression and empty dark full and lifeless eyes that made the league shiver in fright. Even Tomura and Kurogiri were disturbed whenever Izuku showed his darker side. Imasuji Goto, you were hired by me to do a job. Please don't start fights until the job is done. Deku said in an ice-cold tone, the threat very obviously hanging in the air. Alright, but after that, right? After that you'll fight me? Right? Right. Muscular asked in a mad tone, unhinged grin on his face. Sure. If you do what you're told, I'll fight you. Deku said as he sheathed his katana and put it down. As Deku agreed to his request, Muscular calmed down. His muscles disappeared and he settled in the bar. He made Compress slightly uncomfortable but eventually the fun came back to this place. Moonfish had a very interesting reaction. He is now completely obedient to Tomura out of pure dread. He keeps muttering about how his quirk is terrifying. How can he leave no flesh to be cut? He sometimes mutters to himself. Is that how others see Deku when he rambles? Spinner was going crazy after seeing Deku's skill. That was amazing. Deku-san, you really are amazing. I mean, you were fast in the video of you against Ingenium that time, but seeing in person is something else. How did you dodge something that fast? Spinner asked with stars in his eyes, clutching his own green rabbit hoodie while looking at Deku excitedly. Deku blushed. He wasn't used to being praised like this, or to be admired this much. He almost had a heart attack when he first met Spinner, who was literally as much of a fanboy to his as he was to All Might. I just thought ahead, you know? Spinner gave a look that says he in fact doesn't know. Sensei always said that there will always be someone stronger or someone faster. You just need to outthink them. From what I've seen so far, I think I know everyone well enough to know their moves, and with that I predict what they will do, then let my sharp battle instincts do the rest for me. For example, Mr. Compress relies on his misdirection. He'll move in a flashy way to create an opportunity to use his quirk. Dabi will attack with a short burst of widespread fire if I get too close. Toga is standing behind that couch waiting for you to go away so she can stab me again, even though all she needs to do is ask. Deku yelled that last part at the couch, and sure enough Toga came out from behind it. He extended his arm. This time instead of a stab, she simply cut him. Almost like she's taking care not to hurt him. Well, what I was trying to say was that you just need to move before they do. Make up their difference in speed and strength by moving before they do and figuring out their weak points. I read enough about those two to know they'd start a fight as soon as they arrived, so I moved accordingly. Deku lectured with a kind smile, trying to explain as best as he could. Spinner was focused. He was taking mental notes of everything Deku said. As expected of the great Karma. Deku-san, you're on another level. Spinner said with a bow. Please drop the honorific. You're older than me. Deku is more than fine. Deku assured him with wave. It was then that Kurogiri came to them with a serious expression, or at least what looked like one. It was hard to read the misty villain's expression correctly. My young has asked for your presence immediately. Kurogiri said as he looked at Deku, who blinked in surprise before looking at Tamura, who looked back, both puzzled and confused about why Sensei called him so suddenly. Any particular reason, Kurogiri? I am not in trouble for some reason, right? Deku asked with a frown. The intelligent Nomu shook his head in denial. No, but MSTR decided that now is the time. Your project is ready, my young MSTR. Kurogiri explained, and Deku looked surprised. What? Deku shouted, gaining everyone's attention. All of them came in running quickly to investigate, and he gave them an apologetic smile. Sorry, it's fine, nothing is wrong. Deku said to calm them down, then looked at Kurogiri seriously. How long would it take? 2 months, give or take. Being quirkless and your research made it much easier to get it down. Kurogiri explained, and Izuku nodded his head. Deku-kun? What is this about? Toga asked, worried. Deku seemed surprised. Deku smiled. Don't worry about it, Toga-san. But I will be gone for the next 2 months. Deku said, and everyone looked surprised. Why is that? Spinner asked in shock. Isn't it obvious? He is going to some mad scientist to get a super cool and super strong quirk. Mustard said, and everyone rolled their eyes at the conspiracy theory Mustard gave. It was obvious from the beginning that the gas villain had a knack for conspiracy theories. Izuku chuckled at that. As a matter of fact, Tamura-kun will help you station in the new hideout until I'm back. Deku explained, and everyone nodded, shocked at that. Tamura started handing notebooks that Deku wrote for when this time comes. These are short versions of Deku's analyses and plans for the next while, so follow it to the letter. Everyone but the 2 most recent arrivals picked up a notebook. Broadened in surprise across the room. Read them up. We'll discuss the details of the plan later this week. Any questions? A few hands were raised. This ain't a classroom. Just ask the DMN questions. Why at the end of the week? Mustard asked. Did he really write this? Compress asked, impressed. You said these were the short versions? Spinner gaped at the detailed plans and the analysis on the gangs they were going to recruit into the league as outers and how to deal with them if things went south. Can I stab Deku just one more time? It's gonna be so long. Toga pleaded with big watery puppy eyes. Tamura smirked, seeing the amazement in their faces. His little brother deserves all praise in this cursed world. He really wrote this. He can analyze any quirk to an insane degree. He probably already knows more about your quirks than yourselves. Tamura was loving their reactions at his answer. And we're going to wait until the end of the week, because we will be spending it in moving the things from here to our new base. Yes, his little brother is motherfucking that amazing and he won't let anyone think otherwise. One person had a different reaction. His fault for not answering her question. I don't know about that, but feel free to ask him. She beamed and turned to Deku, who gave her his arm, but once more she gave a shallow cut, only enough to draw blood, then started drinking it for a bit, then stopped when she had her fill. But why are we changing the hideout? Mustard asked in confusion. Because this place will be found eventually when we make ourselves famous, so better have a secret place where the government couldn't track us. You will be going in and out of the base via Kurogiri's portals. The only ones allowed to know the location of the base are me, Tamura-kun, and Kurogiri. Deku explained to the league members. Well now people, the boss started this. He did most of the work and gave us reputation. He got us shit ton of money to start our operations through his heists and even got us contacts and plans to follow. He is not to be disappointed. By the time Deku is back, I expect that we finished all of our plans in this notebooks. Am I clear? So come on, let's put down this messed up society once and for all, Tamura said as he raised his fist and everyone cheered rilled up. After the crowd dispersed when they gave Deku their goodbyes and Toga gave him a big hug, and he almost fainted, he approached his older brother with an amused expression. For someone who looked so disgusted at having to interrupt his gaming to meet with everyone and take your post as their boss, you gave quite the speech. Did Kurogiri put you up for it? Deku asked, amused. No, Tamura said flatly. Deku put up his most doubtful-looking expression. No way Tamura could give a speech like this. Go ask him if you're so unsure. I initially just wanted to give them the papers, say, hey losers, I'm your new boss, start packing, and be done with it, but the look on their faces as they read your analyses made me want to show you off. Nobody ever appreciated you in your life. I wanted to show you that this people will. They're like us. Tamura explained with scowl at his brother's doubts. Deku was tearing up. He has the best big brother anyone could ask for. No crying. No hugging either. He said that, but he didn't offer as much resistance as he could. After that, Deku turned to Kurogiri and smiled. I'm ready, Kurogiri. Take me to sensei. The green-haired mastermind said as he prepared for what he was sure will be an unpleasant experience. Deku stepped out of the portal into the familiar laboratory of Dr. Garaki. The young mastermind looked around at the many tanks filled to the second-generation Nomus, animals of many kinds in each one the tanks. Hunting dogs, bears, birds, tigers and many other types are being made into low tiers, middle tiers and upper tiers, as well as the very lovely high-ends that Deku wanted to see in action soon. The army would be ready in a year, give or take. It was perfect for the mastermind if you ask him. He already had an idea, a plan on how to make the operation go faster, but he needed to take his promised prize first. Hello there, my boy, welcome back. I hope you are excited. Project Absorb for Occupy is finally ready. We only need the implantation surgery. All for One spoke as he welcomed his prized disciple with a smile. Now I'll warn you, the quirk implantation and body modifications will not be pleasant, but with your unrivaled tenacity it shouldn't be a problem in the slightest. The old villain said, and Deku smiled brightly. Don't worry, sensei. I will be fine, and I am very surprised that my idea was actually a success. Izuku said happily as he grabbed his notebook. So, what was the results? Was the fusion perfect? What can the quirk do? Is it truly what we hoped it is? Deku asked, and All for One smiled. Well, to answer those few questions, since it's all we know for now, Absorb for Occupy can, since it's All for One base, take quirks and give them, and since we combined it with a copy of the stockpiling quirk I gave my brother, it gets more power stockpiled by adding quirks to the core of your main quirk. The fusion between the two quirks was perfect in a surprising way. It went perfectly smooth. Just as we hoped. A gem greater than one for all. All for One explained, and Deku was taking notes until Doctor came with an excited look. Young lord, shall we begin? The operation chamber is set. Garaki said in excitement. Deku chuckled at the doctor's enthusiasm and nodded his head. Yes, let's get to work. Deku said as he readied himself for 2 months of hell. But first, I need you to give me a list of quirks you would like to get to fill the stockpile so we could copy them. Keep it small. All for One said, and Deku nodded as he gave a list of quirks. The list had 7 quirks of 7 specific quirks that intrigued the young villains. All for One looked through the quirks, and if he had eyebrows he would have raised them at the simple choices. Are you all right with this, sensei? Deku asked, and All for One nodded. Well, of course, but some choices is strange, such as quirk number 3, but it should be done. All for One nodded. All right, let's get started then. Deku smiled as he followed the doctor to the operation chamber.